Tuesday live. Now you and I'm your there on you. Place number one. We'll talk about come draft day. And look, at the end of the day, 369, 35 of 57. I didn't leave all that impressed with Bryce Young. Of course, if you're watching him against Vanderbilt, he looks great. But in that game last night, I was expecting Young to kind of jump off the page as we're in draft season now. I wanted to kind of see, all right, because this draft doesn't have a quarterback. It doesn't have that guy. Some people like Kenny Pickett. I'm not a big Kenny Pickett guy. I don't think he's a guy that I'm taking. If I have a top 10 pick, I'm not hitching my wagon to Kenny Pickett or any of the other quarterbacks in this draft. We talked about the other day, next year's draft, everybody imagines that Bryce Young would be the guy. If I said, sit in front of the TV, watch this guy play, and tell me if you want to hitch your franchise to him, last night I would say, not necessarily. That was my takeaway from the game last night. I was watching that game in hey, let me watch this guy. I watched him a couple times this year. Obviously, throughout most of Alabama's schedule, everybody talks about the SEC, the SEC, the SEC. The SEC really didn't have anybody this year. Tennessee, LSU stunk, Mississippi State, all these typical teams were not nearly as good as they have been in the past. There was not really a rival other than Georgia on the other side, the East, and Alabama in the West, that really was there to push any of those two teams. So if you were watching Bryce Young play against Tennessee, yeah, you thought he was the number one pick in the draft. But my takeaway last night was, man, he's small. Am I off on that? Did anybody else notice that Young looks really small when out on that field in that kind of setting? I'm thinking, if this guy is going to be the number one pick in the draft, not this year. Remember, Bryce Young is not in the draft this year. He will be the quarterback taken in next year's draft. The numbers were there. I just didn't leave like all that impressed in the biggest moment. I'm watching the guy in the biggest moment. Yeah, he looks great in other moments, but I wanted to really see, because we've talked a lot. I don't like the quarterbacks in this draft class. All right, what if Jalen Hurts comes back next year and then he really struggles and he takes a step back? You got to start looking at quarterbacks the year after. Bryce Young is thought to be the best one in that draft class, and I didn't leave all that impressed with him last night. So I'm thinking to myself, now, can he get bigger and better? Sure. But I wasn't all that impressed with him last night, even though if you just said, here's his numbers, 35 of 57 for 369 yards. He had the 2 interceptions and a big one late in the game.
Well, part of the problem with Bryce Young is also he's only 20 years old. So he's still very young in his physical development, you could argue. And, this is what happens. And part of the reason why when you evaluate these guys, you can't just go off of stats and awards. Because when it comes to quarterbacks, there's so much more to the position. You saw last night that Georgia changed the entire game plan against Alabama. The SEC championship game, their whole plan was to stop Bryce Young, and they failed. Last night, Georgia's plan was to stop all of Bryce Young's teammates, and that's how they were able to shut them down. They told Bryce Young, you can't – it's all on you, bro.
Right, exactly. You try to beat us.
Right, and that's where Bryce Young – realized that he didn't have enough time in the pocket. And, the right tackle for Alabama, I forget his name. I mean, that guy was just getting whipped, as you would call him, Mike, every single play. I mean, that dude shouldn't be starting. They were saying on the broadcast that apparently he was the third string center. They kicked him out the right tackle because they had nobody else to play right tackle.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a horrible situation to be in at any level of football, let alone the college football national championship game against the number one defense in the country.
Yeah, it reminded me of the Super Bowl last year, is that you got to this point and Kansas City just got whipped up front. I mean, Georgia had 4 sacks, analogy. 9 tackles for losses. They were in the backfield all night long. I mean, they absolutely dominated the game from the line of scrimmage. I left impressed. Dean the numbers on him weren't great afterwards, but you just saw in coverage, he did a great job. I mean, he's playing the middle. Guys are going to motion. He's following him out there. I mean, he's playing corner almost at some parts.
Well, one of the things he did with Dean as well is, so Dean was almost like a defensive decoy. They were if you watch some of the different angles they show on the replays, what would happen is Georgia would use Dean as a guy who would shift in the motion, but he wasn't the guy attacking on the play. So Alabama kept thinking that Dean was maybe coming on a blitz or Dean was going in coverage, and they totally manipulated Alabama to the point where Bama didn't know what to do in certain situations. And that's why, for example, Nolan, for example, got that huge tackle for a loss on third down in the red zone because Bama's offense kept looking for Dean. Well, they were so focused on that one guy, it opened up the other players to have big plays.
So did you enjoy the game? I mean, I know college football is your thing. That's it. I think there's a bowl game after this, isn't there?
I mean, I know that there's, the East-West Shrine game and stuff like that. There's another bowl game I don't know off the top of my head. I mean, the FCS is done too, so.
Okay. I thought, maybe I'm thinking there was a bowl. It was the LSU Kentucky game.
Oh, yeah.
That one fell on like a weird day.
Yeah, that was.
So that was it. That was the big hoorah last night.
That's it. I'm sad. I'm all sad it's over.
Right? I know you were saying today, like college football is over. That's it. You got nothing left.
I know. It's just the NFL now.
Well, you got the draft.
Yeah, but that's months away. Now it's all, the only football left is the NFL, and I guess the USFL is coming this fall, or is it next year?
Yeah, got the USFL coming this fall. But I wasn't like watching the game with a lot of oomph last night. I mean, I just, I don't know.
Well, you just leave that to the crazy people like me.
Yeah, I mean, I like college football, don't get me wrong, but I wasn't like all that psyched up by this match.
I was very curious to see if it was what I thought it would be, which is both teams changing their philosophy coming into the game. And I thought that Georgia made better adjustments than Alabama did. And I think that's a big reason why they won.
Yeah. Well, I was watching the game. I was watching Dean because he's a first round pick possibility. What other guys? You wrote that article. What other guys were you kind of watching? I was watching Young primarily for Alabama just because of the whole quarterback thing, and I've seen Young play plenty of times this year. I've watched Alabama play probably 5-6 times this year. Mm-hmm. And it's not like a surprise to me that Young's very good and highly thought of. But you said last week that he is the presumptive number 1 overall pick next year.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, well, let me, because I like him coming into the game, watching him this year. I didn't think he would be the number 1 overall pick from what I've seen. I'm just, to me, he's small. He's just very small.
Yeah, he's a very, when they say he's 6 foot, I think they're saying 6 foot with cleats on.
Not only is he small height-wise, he's small size-wise. I mean, he can't be 200 pounds.
No, I think he's 190.
Yeah, he is tiny, man. Somebody just texted in, says, totally agree with you, Mike. Bryce Young's a right-handed Tua. He's talented in the system, but not really an NFL body type.
I wouldn't go that far for this reason. First of all, Young doesn't have an injury history like Tua does. Tua was injured in high school and every year of college. Bryce Young doesn't have the injury history. So,
by the way, you mentioned Bryce Young being 20 years old. Jalen Hurts was out there in the national championship game against Deshaun Watson at 18 years old.
True.
And he led him on that drive. If you remember, he led them down the field and gave him the lead, and then Watson led Clemson down to score. But at that time, Jalen Hurts was an 18-year-old freshman doing that.
That is true, yeah. I'm not saying the age is a I'm using the age more as a reason for his body. Like he just might not be filled out yet. That's my thing.
All right.
Now I'm not saying I love Bryce Young. I understand where you're coming from. I just think that when you look at Bryce Young, I think you have to also understand, like you said with the Super Bowl last year, when the offensive line is not built properly up front, because they graduated a bunch of kids from the line last year. One of them is in Philadelphia right now. You lose something. And I think Georgia's defensive talent was too much. And this is something that on Saturday, on Sports Bash Saturday, that Israel Troop from the Believe Podcasting Network and Emery Hunt from CBS Sports HQ both brought up. And that is Georgia has NFL talent at almost every position on defense. So you can literally watch that entire game and find future prospects. up and down that defensive field. And we mentioned Kobe Dean. Well, listen, that guy Nolan in the secondary, he's a talent too. Davis on the defensive line. Some people say that he reminds people of Fletcher Cox. Like, there's dudes on Georgia's defense that they're going to be in the NFL and they're going to make impacts. And I think that people may not see it coming because, as some other people have said who know more than even me, they have told me, they're like, look, Georgia doesn't have the superstars, but they have equal talent to that 2018 team.
Got it. Well, the college football season in the books. Georgia, for the first time since 1980. Think about that. You're going back to Herschel Walker when Georgia last won a national championship.
You see, Coach Dooley was in attendance.
How about it? There was the whole Alabama. I was going to say there was an injury that I didn't, the fact that a lot of people brought up or texting in that the Bama wide receiver got hurt.
Yeah, Williams got injured. Obviously, Menchie got injured previously. It was a huge blow to the talent on their offense, but they still have other guys. It's not like, the difference between Alabama and, let's say, Cincinnati is that Cincinnati's starters are top-tier college football starters, but their backups are not. You know what I mean? Alabama's backup wide receiver is probably better than your favorite team's wide receiver.
Well, which is evidenced by the fact that they've lost Ruggs, Judy, Devontae Smith, Calvin Ridley. I mean, you could go from 5 to 7 years back of wide receivers that keep graduating to the NFL, and they just keep finding a new guy to come in.
I mean, you got, over at WVU, for example, Mike, your school, Graham Harrell's over there. Graham Harrell's probably sitting on his couch right now and be like, I'd love to have one of those Alabama receivers. I'd love to have any of them. Can I have one of them?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think Alabama's probably got 6 deep at wide receiver. The game was at least competitive for a while, and then late in the game, you got you had the interception,
right,
and then the touchdown that really just kind of.
Yeah, the interception by Ringo. I thought the explanation from Kirby was a little funny because Kirby said, I knew he was going to catch it, but I had no idea he was going to return it for a touchdown. Because according to Kirby, apparently they practice that kind of interception numerous times throughout the year.
So Georgia wins the national championship, college football in the books. So now totally turn to the draft. You got East-West Shrine, Senior Bowl, all that stuff. We'll start to turn our attention to the draft as soon as this Eagles season ends. Some Eagles news to get to in a couple of avenues. One, and I know a lot of Eagles fans out there are probably going to enjoy this story, but defensive coordinator Jonathan Gannon has a request to be a head coach with the Denver Broncos. So there's a couple of ways to look at this. One, I haven't met very many people who are big fans of John Gannon. I feel like most people in the listening audience, everybody just gets on that train. One side of the ledger doesn't like him. The whole ledger goes that way. This isn't there's never a seesaw with the fans, right? It's Gannon's the worst. He stinks. He's got to go. There's not really a lot of fair and balance when it comes to making judgment. Why the hell? All right, fans who want John Gannon. I have no problem with John Gannon. I just don't feel he has the talent that he wants. Like, we're talking college football. College football is a big, I need to filter out the old system of players and get my system of players in. When a coach is in college football, all right, I'll use West Virginia as an example because I'm obviously very close to that program. Dana Holgorsen was the coach at West Virginia. He has his style of players that he's recruiting. When he leaves to go to Houston, Neil Brown comes in. He now has however many years worth, 4 years at least worth of Dana Holgorsen players and recruits. Well, Neil Brown now needs a cycle of 4 years almost to get Holgorsen's players out and get his players in. After that, the gloves are off, man. Like, Neil Brown's in an area now where I'm going to start judging him way differently. I have been very unhappy with the direction of the WVU program. That being said, Neil Brown is playing with Dana Holgerson's players. No longer. The Holgerson players are gone. The Brown players are now in. Same with the Eagles. John Gannon has Jim Schwartz's defensive scheme players. So some would say, well, why would they hire John Gannon? You were not hiring John Gannon with this year in mind. Nobody thought the Eagles were making the playoffs. They hired a guy who they said has good defensive scheme and principles. This year, be damned. We want you for the long haul. And if you happen to put a defense together that helps us get to the playoffs, that should be gravy. For God's sakes, he's getting head coaching interviews. So why do people think they know more is my question. People always think they know more. You know, I watch football on a Sunday, therefore I know more than someone who has a job working in the front office every single day. That doesn't mean they're always right and that you're always wrong. It's just that universally, I feel like everybody's like, John Gannon stinks. Why? There's one reason. There's one reason why people listening think John Gannon's not good enough. And that's because he doesn't blitz as much as you want him to. That's it. There's no other reason. You just want him to blitz more. You don't have a clue about anything else other than you just want him to blitz more. Let me tell you something. If this team blitzes more against Tom Brady, they're going to give up 60. Tom Brady is going to say, please, come blitz me. Come after me. And I will show you how idiotic it is to come blitz me. You cannot come after Tom Brady like that. He's going to kill you. John Gannon is smart enough to know that I don't have the personnel to do what these people want me to do. If I'm going to send blitzers all over the place, I'm going to get torched. I don't have the safety. I don't have athletic enough safeties to help out. His safeties are just blah. Steven Nelson's good. He's not great. So if I'm going to put all this pressure on Steven Nelson, teams are going to go right after him. And you're going to start complaining of, why do we give up so many big plays? Why are teams scoring 60-yard touchdowns on us every single week? You know, the Eagles give up the 10th least amount of yards in all of football. Number 10 in the league. They give up 328 yards a game. It's the 10th best in all of football. They give up long drives. You know who else gave up long drives? Jim Johnson's defenses. Bend, but don't break. In the Eagles game against Washington, bend, but don't break. Washington kicked 3 field goals. They bend, but they didn't break. And at the end of the day, we gave up 3 field goals. They moved the ball on us. Let's figure out what we need to do. And what do they do in the second half? They shut him out. So John Gannon has a head coaching interview, and you would have thought that there was going to be a parade down Broad Street when that report went out there. Take them. You can have them. Good riddance. This is a team that has a top 10 defense in football right now. I get it. I don't think the defense, like I said 2 weeks ago, what's the one thing to me that differentiates Eagles? I just don't think their defense is all that good. I also don't think they have very good personnel on defense. I'm not sitting here saying, man, why is their defense so bad? They got Von Miller and Aaron Donald and, Jalen Ramsey. No, they don't got Jalen Ramsey. They don't got Aaron Donald. They don't have Von Miller. They've got Alex Singleton. I mean, Slay's a nice player. Don't get me wrong. I'm not sitting here bashing Slay. Fletcher Cox is not Aaron Donald anymore. I mean, he's just not in the same league. Their best pass rusher is Josh Sweat. Their best linebacker is TJ Edwards. This isn't the same defense. John Gannon's done a really good job, guys. As I told you in years past with Jim Schwartz, I don't know what you wanted from Jim Schwartz. You wanted more blitzing. That's the only thing you know how to complain about. It's like a hockey fan who doesn't know squadaddle about hockey. The only thing they complain about is they want the other goaltender, right? Nobody knows what to complain about in hockey, so you just said the goalie stinks. And the only thing people complain about in football with defense is you want them to blitz more. That's the only complaint anybody can ever come up with is why don't they blitz more? Buddy Ryan and Jim Johnson have ruined, it's like your son or your daughter, for all the parents out there who have a child who sits on the Xbox or PlayStation all day long and just plays video games. And then the mom or dad will say, your brain's turning to mush. Buddy Ryan and Jim Johnson turned Eagles fans into mush brains when it comes to defense. They have told you essentially there's only one way to play defense, and that's blitz 98% of the time. You can't blitz 98% of the time, and you certainly can't blitz that much with this roster. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. It's brought to you by Matt Blatt Kia. They want to get you approved today. Matt Blatt, 6211 Black Horse Pike, Egg Harbor Township. I'm Mike Gill. Coming up, we got a good show for you today. Getting you ready for the Eagles and the Buccaneers. I'm going to do rankings all week long for playoffs. Today, I'm going to rank the teams that can win the Super Bowl in order from 1 to 14. My level of confidence of teams that can win the Super Bowl in the playoff field from 1 to 14. That's coming up a little bit later. John Clayton today at 5 o'clock. Rob Motti. Pete Thompson for a Tuesday with Thompson. MKB. Is there a holdup in the Sixers Ben Simmons deal? Go to our website for details right now, 973ESPN.com, the free mobile app. And, of course, you can watch the show live on YouTube. Use the YouTube app on your smart TV or phone. You can comment along the way here on the Sports Bash. I'm Mike Gill, back with more Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. 2:30 Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app, live video, 97.3 ESPN.com, YouTube channel. You can go to our website, 97.3 ESPN.com, and watch the show. You can do it through your smart TV or phone. Just use the YouTube app. A couple people watching the show commenting already on the YouTube stream. Ant Live 609 says Nick Sirianni needs some Coach of the Year consideration. Yeah, he would be in my Coach of the Year consideration. I don't know that he would be the winner, but he certainly would be in there, I think. I don't think he's getting a lot of steam. I don't think he's getting a lot of support, but I definitely think that he's a guy that should be in the conversation when you take a look at. I'm just going off of, we talked about this on Thursday's show. Pro Football Focus put out a list of guys that they said, oh, these candidates, and he wasn't even in the candidates. Heck, Brian Flores got fired, for God's sakes, and he was one of the candidates. So I think my candidates were, if I'm just going off of memory here, my candidates for Coach of the Year would have been Zach Taylor in Cincinnati, Vrabel in Tennessee. I said Bisaccia in Vegas, right? I mean, they're in the playoffs, for God's sakes. The other guy I had was Sean Payton if they made the playoffs, which they did not. So I guess Payton's candidacy takes a little bit of a hit. And the other guy would be, who was the last guy that I mentioned? I mean, I guess LaFleur. I mean, they're the best team in the NFC, but they were the best team last year, or one of them. And Sirianni's got to be in there. Belichick, he was the other guy. Belichick, they didn't make the playoffs last year, and here they are. I mean, what about Mike Tomlin, by the way? Mike Tomlin, who's never had a losing season ever. They have this team this year that is just an average talent-wise. And he gets them to the playoffs. Now, you would say, oh, look, they're 9-7-1. They don't have this great team, and they're probably going to be one and done. I don't think they had a playoff roster was kind of the reasoning why you would say, hey, maybe he's a Coach of the Year candidate. Uzi Wolf is watching the show on YouTube. He says, today marks the anniversary of Doug Peterson leaving. I remember Mike and Broads breaking the news, probably always will. So today, yeah, because keep in mind there's an extra season. Now, this goes to the notion. Now, remember, there's an extra week in the NFL this year. Because I want to say, somebody tweeted when it came to the Giants looking for their coaching situation, right? You don't have to rush to make a hire. That's one of the things I think that when the Eagles hired Doug Peterson, they didn't rush to hire Doug Peterson. He won a Super Bowl. Is he the greatest coach of all time? No. Although he's getting interviews in Jacksonville, Chicago, Minnesota, and others. He's going to get more interviews. Doug Peterson's going to get a head coaching job, I would imagine. That said, this whole rush, hey, let's fire our guy so we can get a head start on hiring the next guy. The Eagles were the last team to fire their guy, Doug Peterson, and they're the only team that found a coach that made the playoffs the next year. All these other teams had a head start, the pick of the litter. And Nick Sirianni was the last coach hired from the last team that fired their coach. You don't have to rush. I don't know what's going to happen with the Giants. Joe Judge is still the head coach there. If I'm the next GM in New York, I don't want Joe Judge. I'll sit down with him. I'll listen to what he has to say. I'll have an open mind. But if I'm observing from the outside looking in, I don't want him. That place is a disaster. I get it. I can't keep changing my coaches 2 years, every 2 years, every 2 years. But I'm also not the GM that did that. So when I get in there, I can't take this guy. He is a latch on from the old regime. More messages coming in watching the show live on YouTube. People forget how much better we looked on defense when Taylor was out there a few weeks. That injury hurt us big time. He's talking about Davion Taylor. Yeah, but I don't think that they have taken – I agree. I thought Taylor did a nice job, added some athleticism to the defense. But quite frankly, I don't think you've even noticed that he has been out there. Or that he hasn't been out there, I should say. Agree? I mean – I don't think you watched a game and said, man, Alex Singleton's really hurting them right now. I don't think he jumps off the page. He's just he's solid, unspectacular. So Davion Taylor, while I think he added something, I don't think that his absence has really hurt the team. But that being said, that's part of the thing we're talking about here. They just don't have a lot of talent on the defensive side of the ball. I don't think you look at the Eagles defense and say, man, the scheme is the problem. No, they don't have good personnel. They have good players. They don't have great players. They have a lot of good players on defense, and some of them are just good. Fletcher Cox is just good right now. He's not great anymore. Javon Hargrave, good player. Josh Sweat's a good player. Derek Barnett, like him or not, he's an average to good player. He's not awful, but he's not great. The only guy on the team that's great, that's having a great year, is Slay. That's it. So it's tough to say, man, the defensive coordinator, he's really doing a great job when he only has one player who's playing great. I guess you could say Maddox has played very good. But I don't know why you would look at the talent on this team and think anything otherwise. Like everybody out there who doesn't want John Gannon, you're probably overlapping as the same person who didn't want Jim Schwartz. Oh, Jim Schwartz has got to go. Jim Schwartz did a great job with this defense. I mean, he had horrible talent the last couple of years. I don't know how they were competitive sometimes with some of the secondaries they were putting out there. Context is king, and sometimes we don't want context when we are trying to make or decipher our opinion. Our opinion is we just want to jump on the same train that everybody else is riding on. Nobody wants to jump in that car and sit there by yourself. You want to have people to have a conversation with. So you just latch on to everybody else's thought. Everybody else thinks John Gannon stinks, so therefore I'm going to have to jump on that opinion as well. I'm telling you, John Gannon, I don't understand how this team has a top 10 defense. Now, part of the reason why they might have a top 10 defense is they haven't really played a lot of really good quarterbacks. They played Tom Brady, they got blitzed. They played Justin Herbert, they got blitzed. They played Patrick Mahomes, they got blitzed. They played Derek Carr, who had the 5th most yards in football. Those guys have the 5th most yards in football. Brady 1, Herbert 2, Mahomes 4, Derek Carr 5. Guess what? They blitzed everybody. Now, they blitzed the Eagles to a different level, 80+% completion percentage, unacceptable. They just didn't have a whole heck of a lot, man. Teams game plan for the lack of talent at safety. Teams game plan for the lack of talent at linebacker. And I think that was one of the big problems this team had throughout this season. 609-403-0973.
Also, some of the games the Eagles defense looked bad against were against Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert. It's not like they looked like garbage against Jake Fromm and Trevor Siemian. So you could argue that for whatever you can say about the defense at times, don't you have to give the other team credit too?
Well, I just mentioned that. They played against four of the five best passing yardage wides in football. In other words, those guys blitzed everybody. The problem was they blitzed you worse than they blitzed everybody else. Like, yes, they are very good. Brady at 5,000 yards, Herbert over 5,000 yards, Mahomes 4,800, Carr 4,800. They were putting up monster yardage against everybody. I think the biggest problem was against Philadelphia. They were putting up yards and you couldn't stop them. They were completing over 80% of the passes. Now, those guys do that against just about everybody. So we're taking the top of the heap. And, when they have like the mean, the median, and, you're taking the worst, the best of the best, and then incorporating that as who you are. The problem is once you get to the playoffs, you're facing the best of the best again. And you have to then be able to rise from who you might be. You might be somewhere in the middle of this Tom Brady, Jake Fromm. Okay, Jake Fromm's horrible. Tom Brady's the best. You're somewhere in the middle. The problem is once you get to the playoffs, you now you can't stay in the middle. You have to pick a side here. And obviously, if you don't elevate to the other side of the middle, which is being good, you're gonna get beat again if you can't elevate there. And that's where Gannon comes in, as he's done a good job of not having them be awful against the bad quarterbacks. No, he's good against the bad quarterbacks. The problem is he doesn't have the talent to compete with the good quarterbacks. It's not his scheme so much as he doesn't have the talent. Because most people play, if you watch teams that play Brady, Mahomes, they will play the same defense the Eagles play. They play a lot of cover two, a lot of, hey, throw the ball underneath, we'll tackle you, right?
Right, but so on the cover thing, I don't mind playing the cover too, Mike. The problem is, other people have pointed out, I don't like the passive zone defense. If you're going to play the zone defense, you got to attack. Like when Tony Dungy was in Tampa, or when that defense with all those players, they were attackers. They played a zone, but they attacked in the zone.
Yeah, well, that's where the difference lies. You talked about Tony Dungy. What did he have?
Well, he had Hall of Fame.
He had Hall of Fame talent.
Right.
John Gannon does not.
No, he doesn't. But I would just say that I would like to have seen him be a little more aggressive.
I agree. Look, there's times where you, like I said last week, you're playing Dak and the Cowboys. The game had nothing for you. I would have blitzed his ass all night. I just would have sent house at him. Maybe I knock him out of the game. I'm not trying to injure somebody, but maybe I hit him enough that next week he don't feel so good.
Or maybe you hit him enough that you just make them decide, I don't want to play Dak in the second half.
Regardless, right. I would have just sent house at him all night long. The game meant nothing to me. I'm playing backup guys. Let me just try different stunts. Let me try different looks like you're talking about. That's what I would have done.
The other question I have is it possible that maybe Gannon is just a guy who is equipped as a better maybe head coach executive than maybe a coordinator? Like maybe he's a guy who's really good at managing players and managing a situation and managing team. Maybe he's not a great play caller.
How would we know that? He has never been a head coach.
Well, he's never been a
I'm not saying no. I'm just saying I wouldn't know that. I mean,
for example, Parcells was never a great coordinator. He was a great head coach, and that's why he became Hall of Fame.
Right, I get your premise. I'm just saying I have no way to make an opinion on Gannon. He was a defensive backs coach
for years.
He was a scout. He was basically a intern. I mean, he's 39 years old. He's been an NFL coach for 15 years. So he's got some respect around this league.
Yep.
Sports Bash brought to you by Matt Blatt Kia. They want to get you approved today. Matt Blatt, 6211 Black Horse Pike, Egg Harbor Township, 3 o'clock hour. Michael Kasky Blomain. Is there a holdup in the Ben Simmons trade? Get the details now on our website, 973ESPN.com. I'm Mike Gill. You're listening to the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. 2:49 Sports Bash Tuesday. Super wild card weekend. You can hear it all on 97.3 ESPN. We've got the doubleheader Saturday, Sunday, and the Monday nighter. Sunday, it's a tripleheader. Doubleheader Saturday, tripleheader Sunday, and then the Monday night game. You'll hear all of them right here on 97.3 ESPN. Eagles pregame coverage begins at noon on Sunday. We have it for you. Merrill Reese, Mike Quick. Mike Gill for you on a Tuesday at Mike Gill Show on Twitter. If you're watching the show live on YouTube, you can use your smart TV, launch the YouTube app, or use the YouTube app on your phone, and you can watch the show on your phone, tablet, laptop. A lot of people, it's funny, somebody, where was I the other day? And the guy came up to me and says, hey, I watch your show all the time. And I'm like, well, I'm not on TV. And I forgot, we do the show on YouTube. So there are people who their routine is they get to wherever they are, and they go to their phone, and they hit YouTube, and they search 973 ESPN, and they watch the show live on the YouTube channel. So we appreciate all those people who watch the show live. Mike, we're going to learn a lot about Hurts on Sunday. I would imagine the Bucs game plan is going to try to stop the Eagles' run game and have Hurts beat them with his arm. Yeah, I think you're going to see a little bit of both. If they try to stop the Eagles' run game, can they stop both the run game and Hurts in the run game? That's the difference. Can they figure out a way to stop, say, Miles Sanders, Jordan Howard, Boston Scott, and Jalen Hurts and take them all out? More text messages coming in. Mike, the Eagles can absolutely blitz Brady this week. They do not have Godwin or Brown, and I'm not sure why I'm not sure the wide receivers they have can create the separation fast enough. They do have Mike Evans. They do have Gronkowski. They've got Perryman. They've got plenty of weapons. Yeah, they don't have the best of the best weapons, but don't worry. Tom Brady's got Did you see the wide receivers Brady played with in New England? What he has now is better than anything he had in New England, I guess, except for when he had Randy Moss. And Mike Evans, I'm not saying is better than Randy Moss, but Mike Evans is a legit all-pro level wide receiver. I mean, what are you talking about, dude? Yeah, they lost Godwin and Brown. They got Mike Evans still. They got Gronkowski, Scotty Miller, Perryman. They're just fine. They got enough talent at wide receiver that if you blitz him, they're going to beat you. They're going to come after you. And look, listen, Tom Brady doesn't get hit ever. He averaged 44 dropbacks per game this season. It's the most in the NFL and the most in any season in his career. They're asking Brady to do more at 44 years old, the Bucs are, than New England ever did. Brady was contacted while throwing 74 times all year. It's the fewest among all quarterbacks to start every game. So Brady dropped back to pass the most, and he's hit the least. So what's the reason on that? Well, the Bucs offensive line is very good. When you blitz, they pick you up. They do a really good job, coupled with the fact that Brady's very quick at getting the ball out of his hands. I don't think blitzing Brady is the modus operandi that I'm taking on Sunday. I got to figure something else out. I can't just sit in that zone all day, but sending blitzes after him time after time ain't getting the job done either.
To your point about Mike Evans, according to the NFL stats email that I get each week, Mike Evans is the first player in NFL history to have at least 1,000 yards in his first 8 seasons in the NFL.
Yeah, but Evans is a stud.
I mean, literally.
He got Johnny Manziel drafted in the first round.
He did. That is true. That's an accomplishment too.
Yeah. Look, for me, the best way to go after Brady with blitzes, if you want to blitz here and there, third downs, double A gap blitzes, you got to come through the middle.
Right, you got to get into the middle. You can't come around the edge because he can feel the edge coming.
Right. I got to ask Darius Slay, man up on the outside, press coverage out there, Slay on Evans. The problem I think they're going to have a big problem with is Gronkowski.
Yeah,
I don't know what the hell they do there.
Who's going to guard him?
Yeah.
The problem with Gronk is also Gronk like Brady, has seen every defense. So he knows, okay, I got 2 bracket over the top. I got a safety over the top. He knows how to get around those things.
You got to double A gap blitz them guys. You've got to press coverage on the outside, or you're going to get your lunch handed to you. And that's what if that's what if you go back and watch what New Orleans did in that 9-0 game, Brady got sacked 4 times, and a lot of the pressure came from up the middle there.
Right.
And look, the Saints have one of the better defenses in football. So you've got to try to watch that film and say, do we have the personnel that can duplicate what they do? All right, I got Darius Slay. I think he can hang out with Evans. The problem is who hangs out with Gronk, and I don't think the Eagles have an answer to that.
They don't have a guy who can. There is no guy on this roster who can do that.
No. Sal Powell on Thursday, and I guarantee you, we're going to talk to Sal, and he's going to say you got to blitz. He wants them to blitz this team, and I'm not so sure I agree with Sal. But we'll talk about it Thursday when he joins us here on the Sports Bash. Michael Caskey-Blomain next hour. The Sixers have suitors for Ben Simmons, but why is a deal not getting done? Well, there might be a slight problem in trying to trade Ben Simmons. I got the details right now over at 97.3 ESPN.com. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash. Head on over to the website. You can watch the show live video. Just launch the YouTube app on your phone, smart TV, laptop, or tablet. Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app, live video. Streaming on the YouTube channel. Use your smart TV, launch the YouTube app or the YouTube app on your phone, laptop, or tablet. What's going on this hour? Michael Kasky, Blow Maine, will join me at about 25 minutes from now. Talk a little Ben Simmons and the latest there. By the way, Jeff Passan, ESPN, tweeted 3 hours ago that Major League Baseball and the Players Association plan to hold a bargaining session on Thursday. The MLB is expected to make a core economics proposal at the session, which would be the first between the sides since they got locked out back on December the 2nd. I see Christian Yelich, one of the players, of course, plays for the Brewers, former MVP, who has a subtweet with a GIF that just has a fan screaming, "Figure it out." Are we at that point already where the players are about to give up on their stance? I don't think this is getting figured out anytime soon. I am in the camp that believes, this is just my opinion, I am in the camp that believes, now you know how much I love spring training, and I have already have my flight booked, my Airbnb ready to go for March. I will be at spring training through hell or high water this year, whether they have a flipping game to play or not down there. I went last year, and they had no games. You couldn't, no fans could go in. I am under the opinion that, first off, spring training, I hate to admit it and say it, it's too long. Spring training is too long. They don't need a month of baseball to get ready to play 6 months of baseball. So I am under the opinion that the players will wait until spring training to get the deal done so that they don't have to go to a month's worth of spring training. So I believe there will be spring training games missed because of this lockout. Now, it's great to read this story that they're going to talk and they're going to put some economics on the table, but I think spring training will be delayed. The two sides did not meet since December the 2nd. They are planning to meet on Thursday. I don't think any progress has been made. I don't think that, look, there's lingering questions about the teams, the haves and the have-nots. There's a big conversation there. The players are seeing how, much like basketball had their problem, the players are seeing how the game says, hey, losing's good. And then the teams that aren't that good, the lower revenue organizations, they don't want to be competitive because they think they can get players through the draft. And getting players through the draft in baseball is different than football and basketball. Why? There's a big why here. Why is getting the first pick in baseball different than basketball and football? You don't have to pay that guy what you pay the first pick in football and basketball. A baseball number 1 overall pick, he ain't making any money. Nothing. And the clock starts and all that jazz. That's one of the fights here, is that the players are saying you're taking these guys in the draft and then you're holding them back from making it to the show, and then their clock doesn't start. They can't even make any money until they're 27. Sometimes they're not free agents until they're later on in their, how old is Rhys Hoskins right now? And he ain't a free agent yet either. Rhys Hoskins is almost, 28 years old? He'll be 29 years old, and he's still not making any money. He's the best. I don't want to say he's the best player in the Phillies. Obviously, they got Bryce Harper, but he's a homegrown guy on the Phillies. He can't make any money. I know, boo-hoo, you're not making any money. What's Rhys Hoskins making? I don't know what his salary is, but he don't make any money in the grand scheme of things. And there's your battle. That's a big battle right there. The owners are saying, look, that's be bad. We'll get draft picks. Draft picks mean what? Don't have to pay you. Hoskins makes $7.5 million. That's chump change in today's baseball world. He is arbitration eligible again next year. He can't even be a free agent again until after next season. So, yeah, the players have a big problem. Multiple sources familiar with the discussions believe that the competitive balance tax threshold is a big point of contention here. And to me, I don't think fans understand that that's one of the biggest points of contentions in this situation. That, to me, is the point of contention. The Pittsburgh Pirates don't want to spend money. Right? The Kansas City Royals don't want to spend money. The bottoms of the barrels, the Oakland A's, they don't want to spend money. The Tampa Bay Rays, they don't need to spend money. They're just smarter than you are. The Baltimore Orioles, they don't want to spend money. They want to exist in a world where they're making money by being the worst team in the league. They have no incentive to try to win. And if they just ass backwards themselves into a couple of stars through the draft, that's their way. They're not going to go out and say, hey, Freddie Freeman's available. Let's knock his socks off. They don't want to do that. So the Baltimore Orioles are looking at their roster and saying, we ain't paying any of these guys. Cedric Mullins, is a guy that most people haven't ever heard of. And they're paying him nothing. He hit 30 homers and hit 291 last year. I'd be shocked if Cedric Mullins is making any money. Let's Mullins get paid by Baltimore, Josh. Can you look that up for me? So they're just saying, hey, we'll get our own guys. Hopefully they work out. We don't have to pay them. And there's your issue. So the report today that they're going to talk on Thursday, I think that's just more aesthetics, man. I hate to say it. I just think it's the aesthetics of trying to tell people, what's that? Yeah, Mullins hit 30 homers. He had 291. He's making $575,000. And he's arbitration eligible for the next 3 seasons. Yeah, Baltimore really wants to get this deal done. And they want the players to be able to negotiate and say, hey, you need to start paying these guys more money. Baltimore's saying, we got a guy hit 291 with 30 homers who's arbitration eligible for the next 3 seasons, and we paid him $575,000. We don't want to work on this deal with you, man. The Players Association wants Cedric Mullins of the world, and I don't know that Mullins is the best example, but they want the Cedric Mullins of the world to be able to get to free agency or at least be able to get out of those arbitration years earlier so that they can make money earlier. Because the trend in baseball has been, hey, instead of going out and getting, years ago, you would just find some run-of-the-mill veteran, sign him for $5 million and put him in your lineup for a 1-year deal. Well, now these teams are saying, I'll just play a guy who's making $575,000, put him out there instead. So now the Players Association is saying, you guys aren't paying any of these players. You're just taking cheap labor. We see what you're doing here. Baltimore doesn't care about winning, and they're not giving any of our veteran players any jobs. So I've been asked this a lot. Is there a drop-dead date? I don't think so. Why? Players don't want to play. Spring training games are scheduled to begin on February 26th. All right, February 26th. Do you think they need to play from February 26th to March 30th to get ready for the season? No. So the players have no incentive to rush this along. They don't have any reason to say, let's get this deal done because we got to get to spring training. They don't want to be at spring training that long. Pitchers and catchers, for God's sakes, they get there on Thanksgiving, on Valentine's Day. So how concerned should fans be at this point? I'm not ready to tell you I think they're going to cut into the season. But aesthetically, again, that's why the report to me is out there. Did you see the story this week about Ken Rosenthal? For those of you who don't know who Ken Rosenthal is, Ken Rosenthal is a Major League Baseball insider. He's been with the Major League Baseball Network for like 13 years since its start. Heck, I remember, I think it was 2009 when the Major League MLB Network launched. It was like a 6 o'clock on like a Monday night or whatever it was. I remember DVRing it. I was like, I love the MLB Network. Was so excited when it launched. I'm a huge baseball fan. Ken Rosenthal is part of the, he's been a part of their coverage. They fired him. They didn't fire him. They didn't renew his contract. And the reason they didn't renew his contract is because he's been critical of Rob Manfred. He was critical of Rob Manfred in another outlet. He also writes for The Athletic. So in an Athletic piece, he was highly critical of Rob Manfred. So Manfred basically says, look, don't bring him back. So baseball has taken some hits over the last couple of weeks between the fact that there's a lockout going on. Then they do this thing with a popular journalist like Ken Rosenthal. So what do? We got to get together with the other side, and we have to try and act like we're doing something here. We can't just sit on our hands and make it look like we're doing nothing. We're taking a beating out there in the PR world. So this is where we are. If you're a baseball fan, I'm not telling you should be concerned. I'm just saying, if you want activity, if you're looking at your favorite team and saying, well, we still need a left fielder or center fielder, we need another bullpen arm or two, that's not going to happen anytime soon, in my opinion. To me, this is going to resemble more of the 2011 NFL season. Dream team. They had a lockout. In the middle of August, whenever it was, they decided that the lockout was lifted. And then all of a sudden, Nnamdi Asomugha, Dominic Rodgers-Cromartie, and Vince Young, and all these players just started switching teams. So I think you're going to get the month of January, no deal. The month of February, no deal. And somewhere in early March, I think the two sides will come together. Here's the problem. What I talked about 5 minutes ago, it's a big problem. And I don't think people realize how wide the gap is there. I don't think that's been something that has been discussed a whole heck of a lot about. Is the teams at the bottom don't want to pay these guys. And now the Players Association is recognizing you are using cheap labor. We've got to change that. The MLB, the owners, they offered changes that included the removal of draft pick compensations on top free agents to make it more free, I guess, to sign free agents. The problem is sometimes when you sign a free agent from another team to compensate them for losing the player, you lose a draft pick. So someone might say, hey, I really want that pitcher, but I don't want to give up my draft pick. Because why? You're spending a boatload of money on the draft pick. If you just keep the draft pick, you can get a guy and you don't have to pay him all that much money for what, 7 years? So one of the discussions is to try to get rid of the deal that is currently in place that would have the draft pick compensation on those top-level free agents to do what? Make it more free movement. So if I want to sign that left-handed pitcher, I don't have to worry about giving up a draft pick and therefore more free agency, more movement. They also want to talk about a raise with a higher minimum salary. In the latest proposal, there's that minimal threshold that they want to lift that because they're saying you're using players that are making basically no money instead of more veteran players. The Players Association is trying to protect their veteran players. So those are some of the rubs. I get asked a lot, what's going on with this baseball thing? There's other things. One of the big things, too, and I don't think too many people understand this either, because, look, where we live in this region, the Delaware Valley, South Jersey, Philadelphia, we have a pretty solid presence with our regional sports network, NBC Sports Philadelphia. They generally do a solid job. Now, their product has gone down exponentially in recent years since NBC kind of took over. When it was Comcast Sportsnet Philadelphia, and they had Daily News Live, and they had live morning shows and live shows at night in terms of like the highlights, it was a much better product. It certainly has gone down through no fault of their own. That is more of a corporate level situation. But part of the problem in this baseball mess that has been discussed is the regional networks are falling on some massive hard times. All right. This is a this is a topic that a lot of people would just really not don't know a lot about. But this is something that I do a lot of research on. The regional sports networks, the RSNs, they're called, okay? Regional sports networks. They are basically dying. And what does that mean for baseball? Well, the regional sports networks are typically who supports these baseball teams. NBC Sports Philadelphia pays the Phillies a boatload of cash to carry their games. Well, what happens when the regional sports networks dry up and go away, which is what you're seeing around the country? The regional sports networks are they're in trouble. I mean, you saw it already with the Fox Sports nets. They're all gone. They turned into Bally's. But even now, Bally's, who was owned by, I believe, Sinclair's up the creek without a paddle, man. So it's a big issue with baseball. They're saying, look, we don't have the money you think we have. The teams are. They're basically telling the players, we don't have this promise. Like baseball doesn't have what football has. Football just got like $100 billion deal from the networks. The networks. Fox, NBC, CBS, ESPN. 10 years, over $100 billion to stay on broadcast television. Baseball doesn't have that. They don't have Fox coming to them and saying, hey, we're going to give you $1 billion deal to broadcast your games on Fox Cable for the next 10 years. What keeps the baseball teams alive is the regional sports networks. Sure, they have a national deal, Sunday Night Baseball, ESPN gives them some money. But that ain't enough to, keep the party going like it is right now for these guys getting paid. The owners see that regional sports network nut is not the same anymore, and they're trying to get out in front of it. So that is the gist of some of what's going on. I hope I explained some of that. By the way, Nadu's on tomorrow for people asking on the video stream. He had something come up today. He'll be on tomorrow's show. 609-403-0973. 609-403-0973. Did I do a bang-up job of explaining what's going on with the baseball world for you guys out there? Josh gives me a thumbs up. That was a little bit of a, I'm a big sports media nerd when it comes to that kind of stuff. There's some conversations that Josh would probably like, what's going on. The Big Ten, for instance, their contracts up for grabs. Where are they going to go? Because they're going to leave ESPN because ESPN went and got the SEC. So the Big Ten is going to have a huge bidding war now between Fox and CBS. So when you're used to watching college football in your past, and at noon you flick on the television and there's Penn State playing Pitt, that's not going to happen on ESPN anymore. That's moving. CBS, if they get the Big Ten, then I would imagine that next season, starting next year, you'll see Alabama, Georgia, Florida. Those games will move to ESPN. Those are normally your CBS games. There's a whole heck of a lot going on in that world. I should start my own podcast on that. I really should. Here's another thing, is that Amazon is in play, of course, Thursday Night Football. They have the exclusive Thursday Night Football package next year. You can only watch Thursday Night Football next year if you have Amazon Prime. Think about that. And the Sunday ticket is also up for grabs. There's another thing. All right, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. And, of course, that's like akin to what's going on in the NHL, the ESPN Plus. You can only stream certain games. Get used to it, people. Michael Kasky-Blomain is going to talk a little bit about what's going on with Ben Simmons. Is there a holdup in the deal? We'll get into that. How realistic is a deal? We are less than 1 month from the trade deadline. I'm Mike Gill. We're going to discuss it coming up with CBS Sports NBA writer Michael Kasky-Blomain next here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. Live video. Just launch the YouTube app on your phone or smart TV. All right, Sixers with the night off. They are back in action tomorrow against the Hornets, Friday against Boston, Saturday against Miami. Monday is their annual MLK game, and that is a 2 o'clock game against Washington. And you can hear all the action here on 97.3 ESPN. The free mobile app, of course, is where you can watch the show live right now. Michael Kasky-Blomain from CBS Sports is set to join us to talk a little bit more about what's going on with the Philadelphia 76ers. Michael, we are less than 1 month from the NBA trade deadline. We are inside 1 month, and obviously a lot of Ben Simmons stuff is starting to kind of reformulate to the surface here. So we'll get into that and some Sixers and some NBA with Michael Kasky-Blomain from CBS Sports. What's up, my man?
What's up, Mike? How you doing?
Well, and obviously the last 48 hours, it feels like some Ben Simmons stuff is starting to kind of generate back to the surface. Let's start with Shams' report yesterday. The Hawks throwing their name into the mix. John Collins is a name. So let's get your take on how a Ben Simmons-Hawks marriage might work.
I honestly don't really see it happening, Mike, unless they get a third team involved. Kind of similar to the situation with the Cleveland Cavaliers, who had been mentioned as a potential suitor for Simmons. I just don't see a return that the Sixers would, be interested in terms of moving the needle. John Collins is a good player. Does he elevate the Sixers championship ceiling this season and moving forward? I'm not so sure about that. I think the Sixers front office is not so sure about that. So, the Hawks might have some interest, which, given the way that Ben played against them in the playoffs last year, it's somewhat a little bit interesting, I guess, that they would still be interested in adding him to their team. But they obviously need the help on the defensive end, but it looks like a situation to me that they would need, a third team to kind of get in there and send something back to Philly in order to make a deal actually happen.
Yeah, how would you think of a fit with Collins on this team? Because I guess it adds to the conversation today. Mark Spears over at ESPN basically saying, look, the Hawks are interested in Simmons. The problem might be the Sixers want to throw Harris into the deal. I would imagine that's going to be a stopper for almost everybody.
Yeah, pretty much, Mike. I think it would be a stopper just in terms of basketball-wise, and especially if you're talking contract-wise. That's two guys on max deals that are making, close to $80 million a year combined moving forward for the next couple of years. And it's just really, really hard, obviously, in the NBA to find one team willing to take on that much salary for two players. So, it makes sense that the Sixers are looking or I guess shopping Tobias, for lack of a better word. That's something I said I thought they should do leading up to this deadline. And potentially maybe they find a deal for Tobias and don't find a deal for Ben leading up to this deadline. I think that's a possibility. But both of them being moved together in a simultaneous deal seems like a real long shot to me.
Yeah, I can't. That would be wizardry right there, right? If you were able to pull something like that off, that would be just, that would be the most epic thing you can think of, right? Moving both of those guys at the same time, because as Brian Windhorst kind of described on the Hoops Collective podcast, if you clear those guys out, you then can become a player again in free agency.
Yeah, absolutely. A player in free agency, you take on more salary potentially in trades over the offseason. It almost would reset the page around Joel. He would be the only, really substantial contract on the books for the foreseeable future. And it would almost give the Sixers a clean slate to continue to build up, potentially a better fitting team around him than they have right now, while still keeping, some of the promising young guys like Maxey, Matisse, pieces like that. So like you said, I think that would be some wizardry on the part of, Daryl Morey and the Sixers front office. But I don't really see a situation where that's going to happen by the next month.
In a scenario where they hold on to Ben Simmons, then you get into the sign and trades in the offseason, right? So in your mind, we're less than a month to the trade deadline, Michael. They try to do something, they push hard before February 10th, or do they feel like they're in a better spot to just move them in the offseason and do a sign and trade?
I think it's both, Mike. Honestly, from what I've heard from, the team and league sources, I do think there is going to be a hard push. Obviously, they have almost exactly a month, February 10th. So a month from yesterday would be, up until the trade deadline. I think they're going to be extremely active trying to find a deal. But from everything I've heard, they're still not at the point where they're just going to make a deal for the sake of making a deal, even up to the deadline. Like from what I've been gathered, there is still a good chance that Ben will be on this team after February 10th and going into the offseason. They ideally still, which, is kind of interesting, but they still would like for him to change his mind. They still want him to play for the team, for the second half of the season and potentially into a playoff push. I think the odds of that happening are pretty low also. But, I think they're going to push hard to try to find a deal over the next month. But I don't think they're at the point where they're desperate and they're just going to do it to get the situation, over with and behind them if there's nothing there that they don't think will make them better now.
Right. They have kind of been steadfast that they want to bring him back. And you're just kind of indicating there is no indication now that Ben wants to come back or is anywhere near ready to come back. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, basically, from Ben's camp, nothing has changed. Basically, nothing has changed either way. The Sixers still, their top choice would still be him coming back and playing for the team this season and moving forward. And his indication is that he still has no interest in ever putting on a Sixers jersey again.
Jeez. All right. That we kind of figured. I guess we thought time might heal some wounds if you're in some camps, but that doesn't seem to be happening. The Hawks, as you wrote over at CBS Sports, emerging as a potential suitor there. If the Hawks are willing to take Simmons, but they don't want Harris, do you think that's a deal breaker for Morey at this point?
I don't think it's necessarily a deal breaker, Mike. But like I said, I think they'd need someone else because obviously the Hawks aren't in the business of looking to trade Trae Young. John Collins is the guy that's being mentioned as, financially a potential fit in a Simmons deal. And if Tobias is still on the roster, I'm not really sure how John Collins would fit as, a potential 4. And if you bump Tobias down to a 3. So I just don't see a fit in terms of Atlanta's roster. If they, bring in a third team and the Sixers like it, potentially. But I don't think that, Tobias not being included would necessarily be a deal breaker for Philly.
Any indication that Harris would have any interest elsewhere across the league? That's just a dead end, in your opinion.
Yeah, from what I've heard, there's been no indication from Tobias' side that he's, looking for a trade that he wants out of Philadelphia, despite the little spat that he had with, fans in Philadelphia last week. He's still, dedicated to the Sixers, no interest in necessarily being traded. So, if that were to come to fruition, it would be a situation where it's not Tobias' camp that wants out of Philly. It's just a move on the Sixers front office.
Right. So, one of the questions that they were trying to discuss on the podcast was why do they want to move Harris? And that comes down to not that they don't like Harris or anything like that. It was more that Morey essentially has one eye on trying to get James Harden, right? I mean, the sign and trade in the offseason, you got to get Harris out of here to be able to bring a guy like that in.
Yeah, and I think, that's a good example. I don't think Harden is the only reason that they had wanted to move potentially from Tobias. Is like you said, he's a good locker room guy, and he's a productive player out on the floor, but there's no way to cut it. He's overpaid. He doesn't produce quite to the level that his contract would indicate that he would be producing. He's shown that he can't be, the number 2 guy alongside Joel Embiid. So, moving him, getting off, there's still 2 more years of his contract after this season at a substantial clip of money. So if you move him and you're able to clear the space, potentially you can get a guy like James Harden. But in general, it just opens your books to pursue any other potential trades or, free agent opportunities that would come up that could potentially fit next to Joel better than, Tobias has proven to be able to.
Now, the way Joel is starting to play, I mean, he is stringing 30-point performances after 30-point performances. I mean, he's really elevating his game to another level. Does that add anything to Daryl Morey's plate to say, I got to do something? I mean, so many people, Michael, keep suggesting you can't waste a year for Joel, and his play is only getting better.
Yeah, and you would think that would be the line of thought, but like I said, from what I've heard, that it hasn't altered the Sixers' approach in terms of how they're going to handle the Simmons situation. They don't want to make a deal just to potentially help the team this season if they don't think it's going to help Joel. He just signed an extension last offseason. Hopefully, as long as he can stay healthy, he still has several more years playing at potentially the level he's been playing at the past couple seasons. And the Sixers just are not interested in potentially hurting the team long term. But with that said, obviously the Sixers are still right in the thick of the playoff picture in the East. They've been playing really well, thanks to Joel playing at an MVP level again. And trading Simmons and getting a boost back this season would potentially catapult them right back into that contender conversation at the top of the East. So it's a tightrope walk that I think Daryl Morey's playing right now. But there's still Joel hasn't gone to the front office and made any demands. He hasn't requested that a trade be made to help them this season. He's been the the kind of the good soldier behind the scenes, and I don't think his solid play has really altered Philadelphia's front office approach.
Right. Now, yeah, because they've won 7 in a row. I don't think people are, you might have not been paying attention if you're out there listening, but other than Memphis, who's getting a lot of talk right now, Philadelphia's won 7 straight. And I think you tweeted out last night, they got 15 road wins. That's the best in the league. So should people be taking notice about what's going on here? Or is it just simply, look, they don't have Ben Simmons and they haven't replaced Ben Simmons, so I'm not buying in.
That I do think that's a lot of the kind of the national approach toward the Sixers this season, and in a way, I think it's resulted in them kind of flying under the radar. They're 23-16 right now, most road wins in the NBA, like you just said, Mike. They started the season 8-2. Were playing really well. Obviously they had a situation there with a COVID outbreak, couple injuries. Joel missed nearly 3 weeks, and they kind of dropped off a cliff at that point. And people kind of I think wrote them off, said they needed Simmons. They weren't a complete team. But now, over the past few weeks, we've seen them, they've gotten pretty much healthy. They're still missing some guys, but Joel's been back. A lot of the guys have been back, and they've been playing, really good basketball. So to me, the Sixers are right in that thick of the Eastern Conference playoff picture, and I think that they are getting slept on a little bit because as long as Joel is healthy and out there playing at the level he's been playing at, for my money, the Sixers could beat pretty much any team on any given night when he's playing like that. So I do think they're flying under the radar a bit.
Yeah, I know that I was talking about this on Thursday's show, Michael. I think you and I had the same thought of what they lost games on purpose to get these assets. They became a good team. It re-energized the fan base. I mean, there's people out there that say, look, they did this to win multiple championships. Well, that's what they have to tell the fans. To me, they did this to get the fans back. This was a franchise that just had no juice, no life at all. And now people flock to that building to go watch this team. But I would ask if there's a feeling, I don't want to say of what was going on beforehand, from 04 to 12, but that people are just kind of, I don't want to say apathetic, but has the shine kind of wore off of those post-process, where the energy and excitement for this team was at an all-time high?
Mike, I think to an extent because there was just so much mishandling in between of, the idea of the process when Sam was here and installed it. Since then, there's been, missed draft picks, bad trades, bad signings, injuries. And through all that, I think it's a testament to the initial idea and the validity of it that the Sixers are still in a position to compete. And like you said, obviously the end goal for any team ultimately is winning multiple championships. But the main thing in the NBA is it's a star-driven league, as you well know. And they had to do what they had to do to get the guy that they have now who's in the MVP conversation and who's the reason that they're still, so relevant in the Eastern Conference, despite the fact that they have an all-star that's not even playing and another player that's not quite living up to his contract. So, I think there is a little bit of, like you said, apathy toward the Sixers at this point in time. But if a trade is made or if they even just keep winning like they have been recently, like that building will be rocking come the playoff time. It'll be one of the best home court advantages in the league. And I think the Sixers still are in, decent shape moving forward. As long as you have Joel, I think they'll still be in this, playoff picture for the next several years.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you ask the Sixers, would you win 10 games again to land Joel Embiid? I think they'd probably tell you absolutely. Now, I know they didn't win 10 games to get Embiid. They already had Embiid, but I'm saying I'm going to the worst case scenario. Forget 19 or 18. If I said you could only win 10 games, but you're going to get Joel Embiid, I think they'd sign up for another season of that. The question is, it's like the Charlie Brown. No disrespect to the current Charlie Brown on the roster, but, they keep pulling the football from us, getting knocked out in the second round. And I think people are kind of in that in terms of the regular season, at least, like, hey, get me to the playoffs, and then I'll have more passion and energy.
Yeah, and I think that's just happens a lot with any team. You would see that it was the case with the Bucks last season. No one really talked that much about them during the regular season because they were a team that had been the top seed in the East for a couple years. They had gotten to the playoffs and been upset. Same with the Utah Jazz right now this season. They're been playing really good basketball, but all you hear about is the Warriors and the Suns because the Jazz were the top seed last year. They were upset in the second round after losing in the first round the year before. So it's just kind of a thing in the NBA that once you there's a lot of excitement when you build up to a playoff team from a rebuilding team like the Sixers were. But then once you get there and you're, kind of hit a wall for a couple of years, it's let me see what you do in the playoff situation. And I think the Sixers, fall in that category right now with a couple of those other teams in the league that have been good, but haven't been able to, quite get over the playoff hump yet.
Now, can you imagine a scenario? I don't know what's going to happen come April, where right now I'm looking at playoff matchups and they, it is what it is. Brooklyn's 2, Toronto's 7. You have two places where Kyrie would not be able to play if that was the current playoff matchup. Can you imagine that?
Yeah, that would be pretty ironic. Can't play at home, can't play on the road.
Can't play on the road.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Just give me. You've been covering the NBA for a while, MKB. Just getting a chance to see Clay and that moment on Sunday night was awesome.
Yeah, Clay's one of the few guys in the NBA that it seems is just so universally loved by all the fans. He plays the game with such joy and such passion, it looks like. And he's just one of those guys that's, you never know. Any given night, he could drop 60. He could score 30 in a quarter. He could go off for 12 threes. He's just, such a unique talent that, plays with so much joy that I think he's one of those guys that, like you said, it doesn't matter if you were a Warriors fan or not. It was just nice to see him back out on the floor after, a couple really tough injuries and a couple years off.
All right, Michael Kasky-Blomane, CBS Sports. We're less than a month away. So, MKB, give me one team that you think's going to make a major deal.
Ooh, that's a great question, Mike. I'm going to go with the Cleveland Cavaliers. I think the Cavs have, some assets, whether it's Kevin Love's contract, whether it's, Colin Sexton, who's kind of been phased out a little bit with the emergence of Darius Garland. They're, right in they're sixth right now in that playoff picture. They have a young core, obviously, with Garland and Evan Mobley and Jared Allen. And I would not be surprised if they, parlayed, whether it was Love's contract or Colin Sexton, to bring in another piece to complement those guys and try to make a playoff run this year. So yeah, I'll go with Cleveland.
All right, not Ben Simmons, but will an all-star level player be moved?
Yeah, I think so, Mike. I think that there's enough players out there right now, whether it's maybe a Jaylen Brown in Boston, whether ultimately Bradley Beal grows unhappy over the next month in Washington. I definitely wouldn't be surprised to see a couple big name players, be shuffled around before the deadline. Maybe even Russell Westbrook in LA. There's definitely CJ McCollum in Portland. There's a lot of guys who's right at that all-star level that I think could be potentially moved around.
All right, Atlanta made it to the conference finals last year. Michael Kasky-Blomane, will the Hawks be on the outside looking in come playoff time?
Yeah, man, I'm going to say yes at this point. I'm going to say yes, Mike. I just don't see.
They're two back of the 10 spot right now.
But, a lot of the teams right in front of them, too, have been playing just better basketball than they have, whether it's the Hornets, the Raptors, the Cavs, even the Celtics, who have had their struggles, the Knicks. The Hawks, to me, just can't stop anyone defensively. When you hear reports about a guy like John Collins being, really unhappy in his role, when you hear the GM coming out and saying that, maybe he made a mistake by paying all the same guys and bringing the same team they had back last year. I think they kind of just caught fire in a bottle last year. The Sixers kind of crumbled. They were the better team. They lost, and I think the Hawks took advantage. But to me, they're not a team that's still, a real threat in the Eastern Conference.
The 4-5 last year was Knicks-Hawks. They're both out right now. Do the Knicks get in?
I think the Knicks have a better chance to get in than the Hawks, just because I think if they need to, they can play a little bit better on the defensive end. I think they still have, another gear that they could potentially, reach. They've had some injuries and things like that. So I would say the Knicks at least have a better chance than the Hawks.
All right, Michael Kasky-Blomane, CBS Sports, NBA season, the trade season, less than a month away now. We'll start to turn our attention heavily on that. Sixers tomorrow, Friday, Saturday, Monday. And we'll talk about it with MKB next Tuesday right here on the Sports Bash. Thanks, pal.
All right, Mike, thanks.
There's MKB, CBS Sports. Check him out, cbssports.com, at The Real MKB on Twitter. When we come back, we got football at 4 in the 4 o'clock hour. I'm going to rank my level of confidence in the 14 playoff teams. Thoughts on the Eagles? All right, I'm going to throw out nuggets on upset possibilities. How an upset can happen. My first thought on that is coming up next. All right, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. Thanks to MKB. So, a couple thoughts on the Eagles, who lead the NFL with 160 yards rushing per game. But if you go from the last 11 games of the year, when they really started to kick it into another gear, right after that Buccaneers game, the Eagles average 185 yards a game on the ground. On the other side of the ball, you got the Buccaneers defense, okay? They are 15th in rush yards per play. Think about this. The Buccaneers are middle of the pack when it comes to stopping the run. But if the Eagles were to beat Tampa Bay on the ground, who would they play next? Green Bay. Green Bay is 30th in the league in rushing yards allowed per play. So think about that. The Eagles have the league's best rushing attack. And if they play their cards right, in other words, everything just plays out the way it goes, they wouldn't have to face a team with a top 15 rush defense the entire way. Now, the teams that would give them problems, the Rams are 5th, the 49ers are 7th. Well, those two teams are on the opposite sides of the bracket here. So I know it sounds preposterous to say you want to pay Tampa Bay and Green Bay, but guess what? For your style, and we all know styles make fights, they can't stop the one thing you do well. In fact, they can't stop the one thing that you do better than everybody else, and that's the run. By the way, Kansas City is 31st in the league when it comes to stopping run yards per play. I told you, I'm going to give you some positivity for upsets all throughout the week. Run the ball against the worst rushing defenses in the league, and you might just be wearing a dog mask sometime in mid-February. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Football at 4 is on the way. Andrew DeCecco steps in today. Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you by Caesars Entertainment Group of Atlantic City. Come experience the ultimate sports destinations all season long. Wild, Wild West, Tropicana, Harrah's Resort, Atlantic City. Book your game day experience today at Caesars.com. Andrew DeCecco, InsideTheBirds.com. Don't forget to check out the Inside the Birds podcast, the pregame show Sunday morning at 10 o'clock to get you ready for the Eagles and Bucks. We'll do the same. Andrew DeCecco, Football at 4 right now here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. We're another edition of Football at 4 with Andrew DeCecco. What's up, man? How are you?
Hey, Mike, doing all right. Yourself?
All is well. Now, before we jump into some Eagles and NFL stuff, obviously last night, national championship game in the books. The college football season is over. Were you surprised at the outcome?
Yeah, a little bit. I didn't really watch the entire game. I had a lot of stuff to do and, different things going on. So, yeah, it was a little interesting to see the outcome.
Yeah, you got Georgia, obviously, wins the first national championship since 1980, knocking off Alabama last night. All right, so let's look at the big boys over in the NFL. We got all the matchups now. Let's start there. Philadelphia, Tampa Bay. Initial thoughts on that particular matchup. We do know they've met once before, but how much has changed since that first meeting?
A lot's changed. I mean, the Eagles are now a run-dominant team. They only ran the ball, 3 times or, at least single digits.
9.
The last meeting. Yeah, 9 times. There you go. 3 times against Dallas. And, now they've adopted a different identity, a more physical, resounding, smash mouth mindset and philosophy that's really contingent on their offensive line playing at a dominant level and also their defensive line really getting after quarterbacks and rattling quarterbacks. Now, we haven't really seen that against any upper echelon quarterbacks, so we need to see that again, or I should say better offensive line. So we need to see that against the Tampa Bay offensive line that's really stout if you want to get to Tom Brady and disrupt the rhythm there. But I thought by and large, the Eagles are a vastly different team than they were back in Week 6. And Tampa Bay, it looks a lot different than they looked in Week 6 as well. Obviously, Antonio Brown, and Mike Evans is a little banged up. No Chris Godwin. So there's going to be certain areas in which you can take advantage on both sides.
Yeah, I know that Brown had a big game against him. That's the game that he actually hurt his ankle, was that Eagle game. He had a big game the first time. I guess one of the key questions in this will be, as you kind of hinted at, the Eagles the first time did not do a very good job. Brady had his way. Without the weapons, will Brady have as much success? So if you were to kind of forecast that initially to say, take away Godwin, take away Brown, does that change the level of success that Brady could have against this Eagles defense?
You'd like to think so, but then again, you can look back at the Super Bowls that he's won with guys like David Gibbons and Deion Branch and Daniel Graham and Chris Fourier and all these different type of players that aren't exactly household names. And he did just fine. It's Tom Brady, so he's going to find a way to dissect the secondary, and he's seen everything, so there's not a blitz you can throw at him that he hasn't seen yet. So you don't ever want to get too complacent and think they're missing this guy or they're missing that guy. We should be able to go into Tampa Bay and it's going to look vastly different than it did in Week 6. That may be the case, but it is Tom Brady at the end of the day, and he will find a way to implement Rob Gronkowski. He's going to affect it prominently in the game plan, as you may expect, and Mike Evans as well. There's still game-changing type of players that can really affect the Eagles, and they're going to have to be ready because it's not going to be easy.
We will dive into the matchups a little more when Andrew's back on Thursday, but taking a look at Gronkowski, at this point, who worries you more, Gronkowski or Evans, with what they have left? With no Brown and Godwin, I would imagine they're the two biggest concerns moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, if you're the Eagles, I think you have to be most concerned and aware of Rob Gronkowski, where he's at all times, given his rapport with Tom Brady, his ability to affect the short to intermediate areas of the field. I mean, the Eagles have struggled defending the tight end largely this season, and they haven't really you saw O.J. Howard and different players have success even back in the early part of the season. So, I mean, they're going to have to be ready and defend that because they haven't. Rob Gronkowski is big, strong, and knows how to get open, can wall off guys with his frame, and he's going to be a red zone presence as well. So I think that the Eagles linebackers and safeties are really going to have to prepare for a long day, and he's going to get, I would imagine Gronkowski gets right around 8 targets this week, and they're going to look to exploit that area. And Mike Evans as well, but I think Gronkowski is the one that they're going to have to game plan for heavily.
Yeah, and obviously, the Buccaneers aren't thought to be a team that is a good running team, and Fournette has been banged up here. But obviously, if Fournette's healthy, that's another way that the Eagles will have to contend with. I mean, they did a great job running the ball the first time. Fournette had 22 carries for 81 yards, so it's just not a one-dimensional offense either.
No, I mean, Fournette is a tough physical inside runner. Can catch the ball a little bit better than some may think, but that's not exactly his strong suit. I don't know that Ronald Jones is much better in that area. Fournette's someone that could have – he's going to, churn out 5-6 yards a carry. If you get him straight ahead, he's going to fall forward and establish that physical element to the offense. But I think the Eagles are going to have to rely on their interior tandem of Fletcher Cox and Javon Hargrave to really set the tone in the middle and wall off these offensive guards and start to make their presence felt against the run and make them one-dimensional, make Tampa one-dimensional, and sort of tee off on Tom Brady because, at 44 years old, eventually these hits are going to start to take its toll. You have to wonder if this is going to be the week. I mean, I thought that the Eagles did a fantastic job in benching, deactivating Josh Sweat and Derek Barnett. And, those are guys that are going to play a key role this week if they want to have any chance of winning. So they're going to have to win off the edge and disrupt up the middle as well.
Hey, Andrew, report came out yesterday that Jonathan Gannon has been requested to interview for the Denver Broncos head coaching job. And I know a lot of Eagle fans are almost like, hey, take him. You can have him. He's not the most popular guy. But can you explain why teams have interest in Gannon? What is impressive about him?
I think it's his football mind. I think that he's considered to be one of the brighter defensive minds. He has experience in different schemes, and he's gotten. You saw with the Colts, he really elevated their secondary. Particularly, you saw different guys really ascend under his tutelage. So, I mean, like I said before 3 weeks ago, I mean, he doesn't lose his shine just based off of a one season sample size in Philadelphia. And another thing you have to look at is, does he exactly have the personnel that he needs to effectively run his scheme? And I think most will tell you that he doesn't. Now, he's been inconsistent, but he's also someone that's sort of finding his footing as a first-year coordinator. Saw some things that were a little bit promising and some that were a little bit troubling. But you want to, you can certainly see why the teams aren't completely off of him right now. I mean, I think he's going to at least have another offseason where they're going to at least kick the can down the road on him and at least see what he has to offer in the interview process.
Yeah, you think he would? I would imagine he gets an interview, goes through the process, but how likely of a candidate do you think he is? Do you feel like someone's going to hire John Gannon, similar to what the Eagles did with Sirianni? Hey, let's just go with an unknown guy who we really trust or like his ideas in mind, more so than what he did in terms of his resume. And like Sirianni was just a guy who had really no experience doing anything, didn't even call plays. The Eagles just saw something in him. That seems to be the road that a lot of these NFL teams are starting to go down. So do you think it is a high probability that somebody thinks that way about John Gannon?
No, only because there's so many different vacancies here, but there's also a lot of viable candidates out there that are, in my mind, and I think the minds of many, are going to be in front of Jonathan Gannon. Now, most teams, they interview multiple guys just to sort of gauge their options and see where they're at and see what they like. So he's going to certainly, I would assume he would get at least an interview, but I think as far as consideration, I think he's probably still a year away. He really needs to really put his stamp on the defense here, develop maybe a position group, have them take the next step. There has to be something that he can put on his resume when he's had this opportunity here in Philadelphia as a defensive coordinator for teams, I think, to really seriously consider him as a candidate.
I know that Saturday night, not a lot of guys, starters played in the game. But I'm interested to pick your brain on some of the guys that really did impress. I had a list of 5 guys that I really wanted to keep my eye on in that game to try to get something from. I get it. They're playing backups. I didn't have a problem with that. But were there a couple of guys that you were impressed by on Saturday night?
Yeah, I thought Kayvon Wallace flashed a little bit against the run. I thought Andre Sacheret was flying around active, got exploited a little bit on the back end, but that's going to happen when you don't play a lot of snaps. I thought that he gets after it a little bit. He's in the time that he played, I think he played a little bit against the Chargers as well. He flows to the football. He's pretty active. Christian Ellis, the linebacker, he made a couple nice tackles. I thought Marlon Tuipulotu did some nice things after being deactivated for most of the season. I would have liked to see a little bit more Teron Jackson. Ryan Kerrigan got a lot of snaps. It didn't do a whole lot with them. Offensively, obviously, Quez Watkins did some good things there. 84 yards on, I think, 5 catches, his first touchdown of the season. Tyree Jackson was made a few nice catches before, unfortunately, suffering that ACL injury. So, Jason Huntley's a player that I mentioned in training camp as someone who I really like, and I think he breathed some life into the return game. So, I thought there were some guys that made the most of their opportunity.
Hey, would you feel comfortable using Huntley in the return game in the playoffs, or are you not throwing him into that type of situation?
If I'm the Eagles, I would. However, every spot, every active roster spot is so valuable in the playoffs that, they already have so many running. You don't want to dress 5 running backs and have one strictly back there to return kicks, which many of them may be touchbacks anyway. And I don't know how much experience he has returning punts. I know he was very prolific at returning kicks at New Mexico State, but I don't know that you really want to have a guy back there who may only return 1 kick in the game when you have 4 of the running backs that are in front of him and are going to get those opportunities to carry the football. And like I said, you need to allocate. Maybe you want to go heavier on the D-line. Maybe you want to go heavier in the secondary. It depends on the matchups. But to dress 5 running backs, I think, would be a little malpractice.
That's a good point. And we're assuming, I guess, then that all the running backs are going to be back and ready to go, Miles Sanders, Jordan Howard included?
Well, Jordan Howard, I'm pretty certain that he will. What capacity, that remains to be seen. He didn't look like the normal straight-ahead, fearless Jordan Howard against Washington. And obviously, that stinger played a factor in the shoulder injury. So maybe having this week off, they'll be able to get him going. And you also have Boston Scott, who's done some nice things, and Kenny Gainwell.
Yeah.
And as far as Miles Sanders goes, he did suffer that hand injury just 3 weeks ago. It wasn't like it was 6 weeks ago. So one thing to keep an eye on is if he is active, you're going to see Tampa Bay go for that hand a little bit. Maybe you wonder about ball security and things like that. So even if he is active, I don't know how big of a role he can feasibly have being just 3 weeks off of that hand injury.
Andrew DeCecco, football at 4. Look at the Eagles and Bucks. The first time they played, they only ran the ball, as you mentioned, 9 times in the game, but a lot of those came in the second half of that game when the Eagles start to kind of show some life offensively. And in that game, Miles Sanders ran 9 times for 56 yards, Andrew. I think they all came in the second half of that game. You wonder if the Eagles go back and look at the success they had on the ground and really try to exemplify that even further here in this game. I would imagine that's in most people's mind, their blueprint is, hey, you ran the ball. Because remember, the narrative in that first game is done. You can't run on Tampa Bay. You just can't run on this team. And they didn't try to. And in the second half, it was, hey, if you try to run it against them, you might be able to do so. So I would imagine they take what they did in that second half in the game against Tampa the first time and really implement that in this maybe entire game on Sunday.
Well, I think a lot of that was some of that success. You have to wonder if it was because Tampa Bay was playing passive. They sort of took their foot off the gas in the second half. I think it could have been a lot more of a convincing score on their end. They seemed like they were almost disinterested, I guess I would say, in that game. But
True.
I think the Eagles have to go into this game with the mindset of running the football. The worst thing that they could do is trot Jalen Hurts out there, have him drop back, throw, and drive after, and have a couple drives stall and not lean on the running game, because I mean you're asking your defense to stop Tom Brady a bunch of times, and you start to dig yourself into a little bit of a hole. And I think that in order for the Eagles to have success, they have to revert back to the blueprint that has been so successful and try and get that running game going. Yeah, you might get 2 yards, 3 yards the first couple times, but just keep going, because eventually it's going to pop. It wears on guys, and I think that mix in some throws in there, but you don't want to revert back to that pass happy offense, because that's when the offense is really proven to stall, and that's when you dig yourself into a hole that you can't climb out of against some of the better teams you're going to face.
All right. Of course, you can hear the game right here on 97.3 ESPN this Sunday, 1 o'clock. All the Super Wild Card weekend action is on 97.3. We got a doubleheader Saturday, a tripleheader Sunday, and a standalone game on Monday night. We'll talk more about those matchups with Andrew on Thursday, and all the matchups, the key ones to watch, the X factors, and more when he's back on Thursday for another edition of Football at 4 right here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Follow him on Twitter at @DeCecco NFL, and he'll be back on Thursday. All right, AD, we'll talk to you, man.
All right, Mike, talk to you.
Andrew DeCecco, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. And coming up at 5 o'clock tonight, John Clayton, the professor, will be here. We'll get his rankings on these head coaching jobs. We'll get a little national perspective from him. John Clayton, of course, longtime NFL insider, will join us here on the Sports Bash tonight. And I do want to remind you that the Sports Bash here on 97.3 ESPN, it is brought to you by our friends over at Ambient Comfort Solutions. The comfort heating and cooling professionals, they know that you made a New Year's resolution. And if it was to stop swearing, then you broke that already. So what they want to do is offer $50 off any furnace repair for anyone who has already cursed this new year, 2022. Trust the reliable experts and my friends at Ambient Comfort to help you save on energy costs and increase the life of your system while keeping your family comfortable, regardless of who originally installed your system. You see, your heater will break. Don't start cursing or swearing. Just call Ambient Comfort and get $50 off your furnace repair. Go to AmbientComfortNJ.com. That's AmbientComfortNJ.com. When comfort matters, choose Ambient Comfort. All right, coming up, I'm going to do my level of confidence for the NFL playoff teams, 1 to 14. I'll rank them. Pete Thompson later on this hour. I want to ask the PT about this Bobby Clark interview. Scathing interview about Ron Hextall. And you can get the details of that interview right now on our website, 973ESPN.com. Bobby Clark just lays into Hextall and reveals a lot of inside secrets about the organization. Go to our website now, 973ESPN.com, for all the details. 425, Pete Thompson in 15 minutes for a Tuesday with Thompson. I'm Mike Gill. At Mike Gill Show on Twitter, Sports Bash, brought to you by the expert solar team of New Jersey, EMT Solar, Roofing Solar Guardian. Start your solar journey today. Learn more, visit espnsolar.com. You know, typically we'll do our who's in, who's out, but we already know who's in. So let's rank who's in my confidence level of Super Bowl champions. The 14 teams, I have them ranked in order from 14 to 1 in my confidence level of who can win a Super Bowl based on matchups and pass and all that kind of stuff. And by the way, talent. So let's take a look at the 14 teams and how I have them ranked here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. And, of course, the free mobile app. And if you're watching live video, you get a chance to play along with that as well. All right, Josh, here we go. You ready?
Yeah.
Number 14, Pittsburgh.
That's very fair.
I think they have the worst shot to win the whole thing. I don't think they really have much of a shot this weekend. And even if they did upset Kansas City, I think they'd get ripped again the next weekend.
Listen, Roethlisberger's like that classic car that looks great, but you know what? When you turn the engine on, you realize it needs a lot of new parts.
Yeah, it's a good story. Good for him to get into the playoffs one more time, but I don't think they have a shot or prayer to win the Super Bowl. So they're number 14 for me.
Very fair.
Number 13, the Raiders. I think the Raiders have a shot to beat Cincinnati. I'm not suggesting that they don't have a shot to beat Cincinnati.
But that's one game.
I just don't think they're going to have a chance to go much further after that. Some of these teams can win one. I just don't think they can win two. And Vegas would be one of them.
I think that's very fair.
Vegas is what? The 6. So if they were to win this game, they've got to play most likely Kansas City.
Yeah, and if they play Kansas City again, that's going to be ugly.
Number 12 would be Philadelphia.
Okay.
Now, I think I maybe sold them short a little bit because what I said before, they can run the ball against Tampa, and if they run the ball against Tampa well, they could beat Tampa. That would set up a matchup with the worst rushing defense in the league in the playoffs. Actually, Kansas City's worse. But Green Bay is 30th in yards per play on the ground. Philadelphia can run the ball. So they do have a realistic, we talk about path to victory.
Right.
They do have a path. Run the ball against two teams that are going to play terrible run defense. I just don't think they could do that for 3 straight weeks.
I don't think they could do it for 3 straight weeks, but I think they could definitely do it for 1 or 2.
Yeah,
sure.
Well, that's why I have them ahead of Vegas and Pittsburgh.
I mean, you got to have them ahead of Pittsburgh no matter what.
11, Cincinnati.
A little low, in my opinion.
Okay, Cincinnati, to me, has the weapons on offense. Their offensive line is unacceptably bad. That's how good Burrow is, and that's how good their weapons are. But you get to big boy football, you need to be able to block every week. You cannot be a sieve up front. You could be a sieve up front when you're playing Cleveland or whoever in the regular season. You can't do it week in and week out in the playoffs, and that's going to catch up to them.
Is Joe Burrow a top 10 quarterback?
I'm going to do my quarterback rankings of the playoff quarterbacks tomorrow.
Okay.
So you'll have to wait to find out.
Well, the reason I'm asking is
top 10 in the league?
Yeah.
Obviously top 10 in these playoffs. He's better than 4 guys, yes. So top 10 playoffs, 100%. Top 10 in the league, doing it off the top of my head, I'd have to sit down and write them down, but probably. I like Burrow a lot.
Because if he is, then he can win despite the offensive line.
All right. Number 10, Arizona.
This is very consistent for you.
I think Arizona's in fact, I think Arizona should probably be lower. I was
going to say I would probably put them behind the Bengals knowing you.
I think Philly has a better shot to beat Tampa than Arizona does the Rams.
Oh.
Yeah, I think Arizona's out of gas. That's what made the loss by Dallas to Arizona so bad. Arizona is out of gas.
Any thoughts on J.J. Watt trying to return for this game?
Go, gadget. Reaching. just really reaching. Watt's out of gas himself. He's got nothing left in the tank. I don't think that helps them at all. I think the Rams dominate Arizona.
Okay. I thought I'd ask. Be
That's
fair.
fair question. I'm glad you asked. It allowed me to throw in a go-go gadget reference.
Go Gadget, Inspector Gadget. Yeah.
Gadget. Number 9, Dallas. I know people are going to say, how do you have Dallas at number 9? I think San Francisco is going to beat them, to be honest with you.
Mm.
And if they do, to me, if Dallas wins the game, they've then got to play. They would play.
Would they play the Bucks?
Well, Philly, if they win, would play Green Bay. The 2 seed is Tampa, so they would play Dallas 5. No, 4. Yeah, they would play the 4-6.
Okay.
Right. Wait a second.
I'm actually in the middle of pulling it up in front of me, so I have the exact thing.
Yeah, pull up that bracket because it would be Philadelphia would play. If Philadelphia won, they would play Green Bay. But if Tampa wins, they would play the 3 is Dallas.
Dallas is the 3. Tampa is the 2. I'm trying to think. It would. Yeah.
Don't you have the bracket in front of you?
I'm looking at it right now, but it's like cut off with this stupid ad on this page. I keep having to scroll past it. Yeah, they would play Tampa.
Well, who would the Rams play?
If everything was chalk, then the Rams would play the Packers and the Cowboys would play the Bucks. If everything goes chalk.
Oh, right. Because I'm saying Philadelphia. If Philadelphia won, they would play Green Bay. If Philadelphia lost, they're out, and the Rams would play Green Bay.
Right, because the top seed gets whoever the lowest seed left. The lowest seed's
left. Right. Dallas is not beaten. I just don't think Dallas is going on the road and winning 2 games.
Well, here's the thing. So if the Cowboys...
They're going to lose to San Francisco. That's number 1.
Well, here's the thing. If San Francisco does beat them, that means San Francisco plays Green Bay in the second round. And in your...
because Philly's 6. No.
Philly's 7.
Philly's 7.
49ers are 6.
If Philadelphia won and San Francisco won,
then
Philly would play Green Bay. Yes. Philly can only play Green Bay.
Correct.
Because Green Bay's got a bye and Philly's 7.
Correct.
Right. Yeah, I think so I have San Francisco 8. I have Dallas 9, San Francisco 8. I think San Francisco is going to beat Dallas.
Fair.
Yeah. Why? Shanahan's just better than McCarthy. I think talent-wise, Dallas is better. Dallas is a better team than San Francisco is.
They have more talent.
Yeah, I'm saying roster-wise.
But the 49ers have better coaching staff.
Not even close. Shanahan runs circles around McCarthy.
Yeah, McCarthy wouldn't even get past the finish line, and Kyle Shanahan would have lapped him twice.
So I like San Francisco. San Francisco does what? They can run the ball. They go downhill on you, similar to the Rams. The Rams are a team that stops the run, and San Francisco says, don't care. They ran downhill at them. Samuel, they'll get him the ball in ways. Dallas won't figure it out. I think they'll exploit Diggs. I think Diggs makes some mistakes in this game. They go after him. And I also think they're going to go after Parsons. And that might sound nuts, but Parsons can over-pursue, be out of place sometimes. And against a team like San Francisco, you can't do that because San Francisco is very disciplined in the run game.
And don't forget, San Francisco's defense is healthier now than it was earlier in the season.
Yeah, I thought this was a bad matchup for Dallas. In fact, I thought Dallas would rather play Arizona. Of course, the Dallas fans just lost to Arizona, so they wanted to avoid them. But I would have played Arizona again every time if I was Dallas. That would be a much better. They were all excited that they moved up the standings from 4 to 3. And I said, I think you'd rather play Arizona.
Right.
But they don't agree with me. But Dallas fans aren't very smart. All right, number 7 is New England.
It's interesting. They're a little higher than I would.
New England on the road. Supposed to be sub-zero temperatures. So I got Buffalo winning that game. And I got Buffalo number 6.
Okay.
So, because I think either team that wins that game can go on a run and make it. So they're in the top half, 7 and 6. Number 5, I got Tennessee. I mean, think about this. They're going to get Derrick Henry full health back. We say full health, but hasn't played all year, so he doesn't have the wear and tear. They're going to hand him the ball 50 times. Prediction. They're number 5. And they're going to play, who's the 4th? Oh, they're going to play New England Buffalo.
Correct.
No.
Titans are the 1 seed. They'll get the lowest seed left. So if
They
everything,
could get Vegas.
they could get Vegas.
Yes, if Vegas beats Cincinnati. I like the Rams 4.
It's a little high for me.
It's a good team. I just don't like Stafford.
I
have a
think,
text going back and forth with my buddies. I just said I just don't want Stafford as my quarterback. You can have him. I'm not saying he's bad. He's just not for me.
I think the Rams are a boomer bust team.
Me too, but I think they're going to beat Arizona. And then they would get who? Dallas or San Francisco?
Yeah.
Well, San Francisco's beaten them like 5 straight times, I think. Kansas City's number 3.
That's very fair. They've had a little bit of up and down season.
And then I have Tampa and Green Bay, 1 and 2. Tampa thing, see, they're playing Philly, and then they're going to get Dallas. Dallas ain't winning down there. So I think Tampa's got a pretty good shot, and I think Green Bay beats them in the conference championship right now. That's kind of how I see it. All right, there's my level of confidence for those games. Pittsburgh, Vegas, Philly, Cincinnati, Arizona, Dallas, San Fran, New England, Buffalo, Tennessee, Rams, Kansas City, Tampa Bay, Green Bay. Tomorrow I'll do the quarterbacks. I already got my list written down.
I did the quarterbacks ahead of time just for you.
I'll do the coaches on Thursday. All right.
Fancy.
Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. Pete Thompson, Tuesday with Thompson. John Clayton tonight at 5. 442, Pete Thompson. Tuesday with Thompson's on the way. Sports Bash is brought to you by PropSwap, America's sports betting marketplace. Sell your sports bet, take your profit, find out how. Go to PropSwap.com or download the PropSwap app today. Pete Thompson is in the house. Little Tuesday with Thompson. The PT's here. Eagles, Buccaneers. He was there on Saturday night as the Eagles took on the Dallas Cowboys. Now, PT, how long did you stay? Did you stay whole time, leave a little early, fair weather fan?
To the bitter, bitter end.
Oh, wow. I'm very proud.
I was in my seats as Quez Watkins ran across the goal line. I was in my seats watching Gardner Minshew get tackled as he attempted to go for the 2-point conversion.
I like it.
Yeah, to the bitter, bitter end. I
Yeah.
cannot tell a lie. I was cold.
Yeah,
It was cold.
No one expected you to say, you know what, and I wasn't even cold.
But it is funny. Susan's son, Michael, was with us, and he kind of shot me a look a couple times like, at one point he said, listen, when they draw the 50-50, I'm ready when you are, kind of like strongly saying like, I'm ready. Okay.
Right.
Now, what I think he failed to realize is they don't draw that 50-50 until the 2-minute warning. The game was well out of hand before the 2-minute warning.
Yeah.
But and once you stay for the 2-minute warning, you might as well stay for the whole thing. So
yeah, like see, I'm one of those, like I've said, I don't mind the cold, and if I know it's cold, I can dress for the the cold. So
yeah,
the game being cold wouldn't have bothered me.
it just it's funny, like you prepare for the cold, you get layers. I had that. I had warm socks. I had my wigwam socks. I had appropriate
Wigwam
footwear. I had long underwear on. But the PT doesn't do jeans, right? You also know the PT tends to wear those like chino slacks, right? The khakis or the navies. Well, long underwear and the khaki slacks, there was just that wasn't enough layers. There was just one more layer missing. So really, that's the only part of me that was cold, was like the top of my legs. Like, what is that? Your quad muscle as you're sitting there, right? You're, basically if you're rubbing your hands on your lap, right? That would be where I was cold.
Pete Thompson, I don't know if you had a preference in matchups, but Tampa Bay is the matchup. Do you feel like there was a better matchup out there?
Mike Carlin and I discussed it on Sunday, and he preferred Tampa Bay. And, this guy that taught me about radio, his name is Mike Gill, said, no, whatever the side the one guy takes, take the other side. So I made a big argument about
that.
Why.
You take whatever side you want.
No, that was Radio 101. That was the first class I took in Mike Gill University. Whatever side I take, you take the other side, PT. Okay, right down the middle. But yeah, no, I took the other side. Truthfully, I did believe that, and I kept throwing these stats out about Tom Brady, right? And I know you heard me say him, that Tom Brady has a passer rating of 92.7 with 1,821 yards, 12 touchdowns, 3 interceptions in 6 games against the Eagles in his career. I mean, everybody that's like, oh, but the Bucs have the Antonio Brown situation, or they're banged up, or they're not healthy, or this, that, the other thing. They still have TB12, man, and he is the GOAT. And I'm sorry that, you're welcoming that matchup. So that's what gives me pause. And I thought that, like, if you went and looked, yes, the Rams have a good defense. Yes, they have a bunch of weapons, and Cooper Kupp is unbelievable, had the greatest year ever. But I still think that Stafford is more capable of making a mistake than Tom Brady.
All right, Pete Thompson, by the way, I would never advocate to take the other side if you didn't believe it. I think I say, Pete, you you're allowed to disagree. I wouldn't say to disagree just to disagree. That's asinine. That's what these television shows, which I can't stand, do. I would say, Pete, you're allowed to disagree, not just disagree.
Well,
you're
in this case, I actually did. So I mean, Mike,
you don't even listen to that right. No wonder you can't get this thing right.
Well, what did you say?
Exactly. Speaking of which, have you heard this Bobby Clark interview?
I just finally, look, you're not supposed to text and drive. You're not supposed to read and drive. But I was reading the article, driving home from school, hurrying to get here for this segment because I wanted to see what it was all about. The headline certainly was good. And Clarkey makes some damning comments about fan favorite number 27, Ron Hextall, doesn't he?
He sure does, Pete Thompson. I mean, he essentially said, that Hextall went rogue. I mean, he just basically locked the scouts out and did whatever the hell he wanted, didn't tell anybody, and had free range to do whatever he wanted to do. He said nobody in there wanted to take Nolan Patrick, and that Hextall basically went and drafted Nolan Patrick himself against the advice of everybody in the room.
And does that remind you of maybe a certain football GM that fell in love with a receiver instead of another receiver that ended up in Minnesota?
Not necessarily. You're talking about the second pick in the draft as opposed to the 21st pick separated.
You're slicing and dicing it. I'm just going esoterically in the fact that a GM can go rogue.
But see, here's
at the end of the day, the GM makes the decision.
I think you're totally off on this. That's where I think people get it wrong. The Eagles' issue is sometimes they have too many voices in there. They have too many people contributing on draft day. We like him. I like him. We like him. He likes him. All right, let me take it all in instead of maybe saying, hey, there's only 2 or 3 of us are going to make this decision. I think the Eagles have too many voices on draft day. The Flyers evidently don't have enough.
Well, at that point, they didn't have enough. But yeah, no, the story that as I've digested it quickly on the way home is that Hextall was operating rogue and operating as a one-man band. And listen, that there's like an omerta, right? There's like a code amongst players and GMs and guys that work. Like, so for Clark to come out and make this public says 2 things. One, and this, Bobby Clark's pretty much removed from the organization now. He's down in Florida. He doesn't live in South Jersey anymore. He will come up occasionally. He was up for the Holmgren and Tocchet night, when nobody was in the stands. He was up for that night. But more often than not, he's in Florida than he is up here in Philadelphia. 2, the organization is becoming more corporate, right? So it's not like he's worried that he's going to piss off Mr. Snyder or he's going to piss off Ron Ryan or anybody else. But you might then counter and say, well, what about his relationship with Hextall? Well, privately, perhaps that bridge has already been burned. So now publicly, he has no fear of going, you know what? Yeah, sure. I was asked the question, so I'm going to answer it.
There was other scenarios that he brought up outside of just the Nolan Patrick thing.
Oh, yeah. He brought up the whole draft in St. Louis. And there were even whispers that night that something had gone amiss, because it was the Braden Shen trade and what they got back for it. And listen, in the end, Hextall actually got that one right, but initially both the fan base and a lot of people in the organization didn't want Yuri Laterra on the team, didn't see what Hextall saw, of the pieces that he ended up picking. In the end, he got that one right. But yeah.
But he mentioned, that there's a lot of 1st and 2nd round picks that he took that the scouts did not want, and none of them are ever going to play.
And the biggest one being Nolan Patrick. I mean, there's no question Nolan Patrick's basically turned out to be a bust. I mean, but that's, we haven't even got into the fact, like the stuff that we know. And I guess, what was it, Anthony Sanfilippo's article in the beginning, or who was it that wrote the one about no buffalo wings and, the size of the, don't let them eat this at like the size of the plates of their post-game meal. Like, he didn't want Gritty to be there. And that's ironic to me because Hextall, like, you're the GM of the hockey team and you're in on meetings about whether or not there's going to be a mascot. Stay in your lane, dude. Worry about the quality of the hockey players, not what color fur Gritty's going to wear or if he's going to be a mascot at all.
Well, it's the picture that Clark paints it. And I'm not saying that maybe Clark's wrong. He might be way off base. Who knows? But for him to kind of come out here and just ambush Hextall to this extent, I thought was quite eye-opening.
Well, is it an ambush when it's been this long? So, like, what's the statute of limitations? Are you never allowed to tell those stories if you're asked? is it, it was on a podcast, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah,
So
who found Bob Clark and put him on a podcast? Like, how old's Clarky now that he's just, basically.
Well, of course, it's the world famous Cam and Strick podcast that I had never heard of until this article came out about his quotes in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that they knew
Clarky's
him.
72, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely Gran Torino. That is definitely get off of my lawn. 72 years old. What does Clarky have to prove to anybody
now?
now?
I mean, he's watching this team right now, and I think it is a good decipher of how he feels, of where he feels this organization. He has no part of the organization anymore than basically he's their most iconic player.
Mm-hmm.
And he's saying the team that's out there is in this position, which stinks because of some of the moves that this guy we employed. He screwed us.
Yep, that was his quote. Hextall made the Patrick choice himself, and there are other choices made in the drafts that we are paying for. 2 or 3 first-round picks that are never going to play. That's why they're struggling.
Yeah,
that was the first shot.
That was a nice one. 2 or 3 first-round picks that are never going to play. I mean, that's a punch to the gut right there. That's worse than Howie Roseman.
I think so. I mean, you just don't usually see it. Like, if this would be the equivalent, by the way, of like Brian Dawkins getting on a microphone and napalming Howie Roseman and how he's running the team right now, or some other hugely popular Eagle. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah. I'm saying, and it's funny you bring that up because you have not really heard a high-level former Eagle really take massive shots at him.
At Howie, no, I don't think you have, because whether you agree with it or you don't agree with it, you want to be invited back to your alumni night, don't you? You want to get flown in for, you're not going to burn that bridge when you want to maybe get here one last cheer or one last adulation, or in Dawkins' case, he's got a book out, right? Plus, I just don't think that's his style. Like,
I'm just saying anybody in general.
But that's what I mean.
Even
Chris Long, Chris Long was an Eagle for what? 1 season, 2,
2
right?
or 3.
Okay, but he won a Super Bowl. So you think that he'd have carte blanche to be a guy that, let's say, he wanted to rip Howie first choice. For God's sakes, do you know who the ceremonial guy was for the coin toss on Saturday night when we were freezing our butts off?
Yeah, Jay Ajayi.
Yes. So that speaks volumes to the level of the organization that this guy wants to come back and sing EAGLES one more time.
I say this all the time in terms of how Roseman's regarded in the organization with the players. Go back to Kelsey's speech. He could have named anybody he wanted first. The first guy he brought up and told the whole story that Roseman got shoved in the broom closet.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't have to talk about that. Jason Kelsey, who is reaching Dawkins status in the organization.
Yep.
He told you all you needed to know about how they view Roseman's role in winning them a Super Bowl. Yeah. On that, I got to roll, Pete Thompson.
Okay, man. It's good to catch up. We'll talk again Friday.
Yeah, happy hour Friday will be fun because we'll get picks for Eagles and Bucks and all the good stuff. Pete Thompson will be there. Hopefully you will, too. All right, PT.
All right, MG. Talk to you soon.
All right, that's a Tuesday with Thompson. It's brought to you by PropSwap, America's sports betting marketplace. Sell your sports bet, take your profit, find out how. Go to PropSwap.com or download the PropSwap app today. When we come back, it's the Professor, John Clayton, right here on the Sports Bash. PropSwap is where America buys and sells sports bets. The football playoffs are finally here, and prop swappers are cashing in, like Jesse from New York, who sold his $250 100-to-1 Patriots championship football ticket for $2,500 on PropSwap. Jesse locked in his profit when he turned his $250 bet into $2,500. The buyer got great odds, and the seller made 10 times his bet. PropSwap has thousands of buyers and sellers across the country, so you'll always find the best odds and collect the most money for your bets. PropSwap even has exclusive, fantastic features like filtering listed tickets based on best value, a free activity feed to stay in the know with all the big sales, and red-hot tickets for sale, a loyalty rewards program that turns your ticket sales into extra bonus cash, and a first deposit cash match. Use promo code ODDS on your first deposit, and PropSwap will match your deposit up to $500. Join all the real sports bettors on PropSwap today on PropSwap.com or download the free PropSwap app. PropSwap, where America buys and sells sports bets. Five o'clock, Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN. Super wild card weekend. Hear all the action on 97.3 ESPN. It starts Saturday with a doubleheader. Sunday, a tripleheader, including the Eagles and Buccaneers. We'll have it live on 97.3 ESPN. Our pregame coverage starts at noon. And then on Monday, it's a standalone Monday night game you can hear exclusively on 97.3 ESPN. John Clayton, the Washington Post, covers the NFL, set to join us with thoughts on these playoff matchups, all the firings that are happening in the NFL. We'll get all that and more with John Clayton from the Washington Post, who joins us right now here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Welcome back, John. How you been? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Good to be back with you. We haven't
Yeah.
been on as much this fall and winter as we normally have, but it's great to be back.
Yeah, well, the Eagles, for a while there, it looked bleak, and then all of a sudden they ripped off a bunch of wins, and here they are. Who would have thought, John, they're in a playoff game?
I know. I mean, that's amazing because certainly I didn't think that they were going to be able to make it. But again, I think what it does show that, particularly in the NFC, and you go back even to last year, is that, you make the playoffs and you're a playoff team, but you don't necessarily have to have playoff team ability to be able to make it. Chicago made it at 8-8. I mean, the Eagles were able to make it, with a young quarterback with Jalen Hurst and also, a changing roster and everything else. And the first year head coach Nick Sirianni, who I thought did fantastic. And so it's like, but congratulations that they were able to make it. And, Howie Roseman was able to, keep things together, get a few guys signed to contract extensions for next year. So I think, things obviously are on the rise in Philadelphia.
Yeah, and obviously last year they hired Sirianni. We got a lot of coaching situations. We'll touch on that in just a little bit. But Sirianni coming in here, and doing what he did, because it was right around that Tampa game, John. They ran the ball 9 times in that game on Thursday night against Tampa. And then all of a sudden it hit him. We got to run the football. I mean, you don't see that happen so often where a team goes from one side of the ledger to the other side. But in this game against Tampa, is running the ball going to be enough, or is Jalen Hurts going to have to prove that he's good enough to win a playoff game?
I think Jalen Hurts has to prove that he's good enough to win a playoff game, because say what you want, and I mean, you can even go back to 2008 and Matt Ryan, because obviously Matt Ryan's had close to having a Hall of Fame type career. If not, he's had a great career. But it took him 3 straight years of making the playoffs to be able to win his first playoff game. And that's the big challenge. I mean, look at Dak Prescott. I mean, he got in the playoffs and didn't win it immediately. And here's Jalen Hurts, who is still trying to prove he's a starting quarterback. And so doing it on the road in Tampa against a good defense won't be easy. But that's why the running game is so important, because, I mean, just like it was last year for Kevin Stefanski in Cleveland, he implemented the running game with Nick Chubb and Keem Hunt and was able to get all those things going to make it easier for Baker Mayfield. The running game makes it easier for the quarterback, but can they run against that Tampa Bay defense?
More on that in a second. I want to get your opinion on this. John Clayton from the Washington Post is with us. He's looking at questions for all of these playoff games, and obviously a lot of interest in this one. But what are the ramifications for Hurts in this game? Could this extend past this season?
Well, I mean, we'll see, because say what you want. I mean, you know how aggressive Howie Roseman is. And, as much as they like Hurst, they wanted him to be the starting quarterback this year. They let Carson Wentz go. I mean, didn't they dabble in the Deshaun Watson trade talks? And didn't they seem to be interested in other quarterbacks? And so that being the case, that's not a total endorsement for Jalen Hurst. And I would imagine it's going to be the same thing. Now, again, obviously the odds are going to favor Jalen coming back and being the starting quarterback next year. But again, it wouldn't surprise me that Howie goes ahead, because they got so many high draft choices and so many good draft choices, that they, make a trade or do something to get a quarterback. So stay tuned on that front.
Yeah, and we know that Tom Brady's 44 years old and maybe had his best season ever, but they have a lot of injuries, John. So do we look at Tampa Bay and say, look, this just isn't the year? Brady doesn't win it every single year, and is he missing too many key pieces?
Could be. And that's going to be the whole thing. Like, for example, I know for 3 months people keep asking me, who's going to go to the Super Bowl? And I say, I have no idea. And even more so now, I have no idea. Because week to week, you don't know what the injury list is going to look like, and you don't look what the COVID list is going to be like. I mean, you look at Tampa Bay right now, they don't have Leonard Fournette at running back. Ronald Jones, the backup running back, I mean, he's hurt. They don't have Chris Godwin at wide receiver. He tore an ACL. They got some, issues right now with Lavonte David on defense. So all that put together, it makes for a very tough way to figure things out. And you watched it last week. It's like, here's an Eagle team that set themselves up to go into the playoffs and were in good shape, and they get 12 guys on the COVID list. So that's just going to be one of the realities of what has been a very strange season and what will be a very strange playoff season.
No question about that. This has been a bizarre situation where guys like Ann Book and Jake Fromm have been starting games in the NFL. The other NFC East game includes Dallas and San Francisco, John. And I wonder, did Dallas really want to face San Francisco? I mean, they won that game on Saturday night. They played to win. That was obvious. But they landed San Francisco. Was that a better matchup for them than playing Arizona again?
I think they're fine because, again, this is where the COVID list and the injury list is going to play a big factor. And, at the middle of the week last week, the 49ers had their top 4 cornerbacks either injured or on the COVID list. And then they got a couple guys back. But, they're still going to be a little bit thin and are very thin for what they have at cornerback. And then, they have some issues at safety. And if that's going to be the case, I mean, you got Dak Prescott. I mean, he doesn't have all his receivers, but he does have, certainly CeeDee Lamb. He's not syncing up with Amari Cooper. Ezekiel Elliott was able to finally go over 1,000 yards. And what you talk about a weird year is like, remember how it used to be in the early 2000s where you'd have 15, 16 guys having 1,000-yard seasons? Well, here we had 17 games, and I think there was only 7 running backs who had 1,000-yard seasons. Think about that.
Yeah.
It used to be 62.5 a game just to be, considered to be a 1,000-yard running back. Now you lower the number, and you lower the number for the number of running backs. But I think right now there's a distinct advantage for the Cowboys, particularly, with their pass rush. They'll get Micah Parsons back. They have, Randy Gregory. They have DeMarcus Lawrence. And they can put a lot of pressure on Jimmy Garoppolo and force him into the mistakes that could cost him the game.
Yeah, and I know that you got the Cowboys pass rush, which you just mentioned. San Francisco's O-line. They went right at the Rams last week. They ran downhill. I'm looking forward to that matchup.
Oh, yeah, no doubt about it. Because, the Monday night game is going to be fascinating because, you got two teams right now that you can arguably say are disappointing and struggling, even though they both made the playoffs. In the case of the Rams, Matthew Stafford has 17 interceptions. That's tied for the league lead. I mean, that's worse than Drew Lock last year. And so that's surprising. And then you look at the Cardinals. I mean, they've been with Cliff Kingsbury, again, down the stretch, not good. Too many penalties. Defense gives up too much on the ground at different times. Kyler Murray is the key to that team. But there's a thought in Arizona that if Kingsbury loses this game, he could lose his job.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, you saw Arizona firsthand last week. I mean, Seattle the last 2 weeks scored 51 and 38 in the game against Arizona, and the only game Arizona played well down the stretch was the game against Dallas. I mean, so that what a tough team to read as they enter the playoffs here.
Yeah, no doubt. And in that game that Seattle won 38-30, it probably could have been 58-16, something like that. Because what ended up happening is that in the first play of the game, there was a fumble that the Cardinals took back for a touchdown. And then, Russell Wilson threw an interception that was brought back inside the 5. So you can look at the fact that they scored 30 points, but in reality, it was 16 points that they generated on offense. And they even had, and this is where Kingsbury could get himself in trouble. He had a 19-play drive, and ended up getting a field goal. How do you do that?
John Clayton from the Washington Post, the super wild card playoffs. We're taking a little look at each of the games here. All right, let's go to the AFC side. Pittsburgh sneaks in. I'm sure Kansas City's saying, thank gosh, because you could have had the opportunity of facing a Justin Herbert. I don't know. I remember who would have been the 7th seed. Would have been Vegas or Los Angeles. But this is an offense that really doesn't have any big playability, it seems, because Roethlisberger just can't push the ball.
No, agreed. And Roethlisberger obviously could be his last game. I mean, you can see that that whole Pittsburgh team, particularly on offense, didn't have a 60-minute game for the most part. And so because of that, Ben had to kind of keep rallying in the fourth quarter to win a lot of these games and doing a lot of different things. And then, they have a shaky, but that's not good. I mean, if not a bad offensive line, that's not encouraging. And then defensively, they're not good on the defensive line. So there's a lot of things working against them there. But hey, the big thing is that they made the playoffs. And the only bad thing for Mike Tomlin is that when the story was, if there was a tie between the Chargers and the Raiders, then the Steelers wouldn't have made it. And all of a sudden, he napped off at the end and couldn't see the end of that game.
I did read that story. He said, once it was like 15, I felt pretty good. I guess it was better off that I stayed asleep there. Kansas City, do they have the same feel as the two previous Kansas City teams? One a Super Bowl champion, the other not a surprise that they got to the Super Bowl, ended up losing with a banged-up offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, I still think that they're good, and they're certainly at home to start the playoffs. That helps. They've got Patrick Mahomes, but again, this is where injuries play in. Tyreek Hill gets hurt during the game Sunday, And even though it's not a serious injury, he should be back this week. He just didn't play, and you can see how they were affected by it. They couldn't make any big plays downfield. And so, Patrick has thrown 13 interceptions this year. He's cut them down now in the last month and a half. But still, I mean, they're not as dominant as they've been the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. They are better on defense than maybe they've been in the first 2 Super Bowl years. But still, on offense, I mean, we'll see if Clyde Edward-Helaire is going to come back and be able to play. But, but still, they have a distinct advantage over Pittsburgh.
John Clayton from the Washington Post. When you get division rematches a third time, a lot of intrigue. And this one, 4-5, supposed to be frigid in Buffalo. And the Bills get that home game because of what happened. They played each other late. Buffalo won that game. Then they clean out the rest of the season, winning out. Patriots lose on the final day, and they have to go to Buffalo now. This one's got a lot of intrigue, and you wonder, do the Bills have it in them to beat Bill Belichick 2 times in a row?
I think they do because, I mean, they won the home game and lost the road game. And I think Mac Jones has hit that rookie wall. I mean, his numbers have come down. The scoring has come down. I mean, with the exception of the 50 points that the Patriots had against Jacksonville, for the last 5 games, they've only averaged 19 points a game. And if you're going against Josh Allen, depending on how the weather conditions are going to be, and they're only going to score 19 points, you're probably not going to be able to win. So I think there's a distinct advantage right now for Buffalo being able to do it. It's been a great season for Belichick, great season for Mac Jones, but I think he's hit the rookie wall.
Vegas, what a game that was on Sunday night. That was just an unbelievable ending. I don't think if the NFL could have asked to finish their 18-game season the first time ever with the better game, you couldn't script one better than the one you got there. Now the Raiders got to try to find a way to bounce back against the Bengals, who didn't play anybody in their final game. They lose. They got this young Bengals team at home against the Raiders. This one should be a lot of fun, a lot of points, I feel like.
I would think so, with Joe Burrow going against Derek Carr. The Raider receiving corps has been a little bit better with Renfro coming through. That should help out. Joe Burrow has Jamal Chase, who's certainly going to win probably the offensive rookie of the year. So it's like, I think this will be a high-scoring type of game.
Yeah, I'm interested because when Philly played Vegas, they couldn't block Vegas. Vegas was all over Jalen Hurts in that game. And I wonder if the Bengals, their weaknesses, their front, their pass, their offensive line, I think the Raiders could get to Burrow a lot in this game.
I agree. Yeah, because, with Yannick Ngakoue and also with Max Crosby, they can really rush the quarterback. Quentin Jefferson, who went to my high school, he is, as did Gronk, he's a little bit of a force inside at about 4 or 5 sacks. And so, no, I think that they can put some good pressure because say what you want. A lot of people thought that the Bengals were wrong in taking Chase, which was obviously the critics were wrong because they needed help on the offensive line and could have taken Michael Penay. Mm-hmm. But I think right now that does help out the Raiders.
John Clayton, Washington Post, there's your playoff matchups. John, a couple thoughts on the coaching carousel. You got Denver, Vegas, possibly. You think Bisaccia, if they win, I mean, does he have a shot to keep that?
He does. I mean, particularly if Jim Harbaugh, signs an extension or gets more money from Michigan, because I think Harbaugh is definitely in the mix with the Raiders. And if he doesn't come, then I think that they may just stay with Bisaccia. But it's hard to tell with Mark Davis. I mean, I think he's looking for name recognition. But you can see that until they get out of the playoffs, they're not going to do anything. And so they're letting a lot of guys pass. And that could give Bisaccia the chance to keep the job.
Crazy. I know Vic Fangio, defensive guy. What direction's Denver looking?
I think right now, I mean, they're looking at Dan Quinn probably be the leading candidate.
Huh.
And then I think that he fits in so well. I'm still waiting to see if they're going to go with an interview with Doug Peterson because I think that would be a nice fit. And then they've got a lot of young coaches. But it's funny because with Jarrett Mayo and some defensive guys, they're actually looking at defensive guys because what they want is leadership. And then what they can get then is, some guys that, they're going to interview Kellen Moore and guys of that nature. But no, I think that they've got a pretty diverse list. They're already up to 9 candidates.
Yeah, John Gannon of the Eagles is taking an interview with them as well. Another
Yeah.
defensive guy. You mentioned Peterson. He interviewed in Jacksonville. Going to get an interview in Chicago. Do you believe Peterson will be a head coach in this cycle?
I hope so. I mean, he's from Ferndale out here in Seattle. I like him a lot. I know that things kind of got a little bit screwy with the Eagles, but I think that he's rested for the year. I think that he needs the quarterback, and I think right now, if I'm Doug Peterson, the question is going to be: do you go with Trevor Lawrence and $80 million of cap room, or do you go with Chicago and Justin Fields?
Right.
I think both are pretty good options, but I don't know which is the better deal for him.
Miami. I feel like a lot of people were surprised at the end of the day. Were you surprised that Brian Flores is out, and will he get another job immediately?
I was totally surprised because you're talking about a coach who's had back-to-back winning seasons. He won 10 games last year. He had a 7-game winning streak in the second half of the season this year, and he gets fired. I'm surprised. I mean, I think you can see that it was either relationship problems with the coaches, the players, that led to his firing. But I think it's going to take him a while to bounce back. Again, the Belichick guys as head coaches, have struggled and don't necessarily get to keep their jobs. And I'm still wondering about Joe Judge with the Giants because as they keep talking about, he is keeping his job, but I don't think there's a guarantee.
Right. You got some GM openings too. Minnesota, Zimmer's out. Spielman, a well-respected guy, he's out too. That seems like it's going to be an interesting job because, I mean, you got a built-in group of guys. You got Jefferson, you got Dalvin Cook. The quarterback, I guess, I don't know that not everybody loves Cousins, but you got an offense kind of built for you already.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, and it's necessary they could trade him, get some value if they need a young quarterback, because obviously they're going to be going with a new GM and a new coach. And so they could go into a little bit of a rebuilding process. They do have enough defensive talent, so they could definitely do some different things there.
A lot of fun this offseason, the Super Wild Card Weekend. John Clayton breaks all the matchups down. You can check it out on the WashingtonPost.com. John Clayton, kind enough to join us right here on the Sports Bash. Looking forward to this weekend. And, John, we'll catch up with you soon. This time I will make sure that we set something up for next week.
Okay, sounds good. I'll be here.
All right, John, take care. John Clayton here on the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app, and, of course, live video. You can watch the show with John. Thanks to him for being a part of the show. Biggest questions for every NFL first-round matchup. Now, you heard John say we didn't do the show as much this year. He was with us all year last year. What he doesn't know is that was his fault, not mine. Sometimes his schedule didn't match up with my schedule. He's on the West Coast. So it's hard for me to have John on when he's out West and I'm here. And that is set up through our John Clayton interviews were set up through a third party. Now, John said, we didn't talk as much this year. I'm thinking, John Clayton wants to do my show more. Come on anytime you want, John Clayton.
By the way, there's a little message I'll pass to you off the air. He mentioned to me off the air. So.
Oh, okay. You can't tell me on the air, you said.
Correct.
Gotcha. All right.
It's good, though. It's good.
That's nice. Brian Flores, as he mentioned, I think the Flores thing, this is what I would say about the Flores. I had a guy on Twitter yesterday saying that he deserved to be fired because he was under 500. All right. He was under 500.
Oh, my gosh.
And he deserved to be fired. He was 1-7. He should have been fired at that point. Here's what I'll tell you about the Dolphins, okay? The Dolphins are delusional.
Yes.
The Dolphins haven't won skedaddle since, 1982?
Well, that's when we went to the Super Bowl, but they haven't won a Super Bowl since the 70s.
Right, but I'm saying that's the last time they had any relevancy, essentially. It's the last time they've been to a Super Bowl. 84? 82?
It was 82, 83.
All right. The Dolphins have one winning season. One winning season. Not 10 wins, not winning season in the previous 10 years that Brian Flores got there. They have a winning season 2 years in a row with Brian Flores as the coach. Here's the problem. Stephen Ross, Flores was changing the culture of that place, and Ross didn't want to do it. He wants to continue to do things his way. And Flores says, you want to do things your way, that's up to you, but I don't want to be a part of it. So Ross got rid of him. He did what every power monger does and says, I know more than you. You're not changing my culture. Here's the problem, Stephen Ross. Your culture sucks. Your culture is an embarrassment. And that's why the Dolphins will constantly be an embarrassment. They tanked on purpose to try to get a quarterback, and they took the wrong quarterback. And the guy still won in spite of the fact that you screwed up the draft pick. You tanked for Tua when you should have tanked for the Duck, Justin Herbert. He had a chance to take Herbert, and he took Tua.
Yeah.
And the GM keeps his job. Why? Because he was willing to acquiesce to the culture of Miami. And Flores tried to change the culture in Miami. He didn't want to just settle in to their lousy culture. He tried to change their culture. And Ross said, you know what? You're doing too much. You're doing too much. We don't want you to keep changing things. We like the old Miami way down here. The old Miami way sucks. And that's why the Dolphins are a losing organization.
Listen, I laid this out on game night last night, Mike, and that was this. To me, the ownership of the Vikings and Dolphins are imbeciles, because you have the Dolphins who the players are unhappy that Flores was let go, right? And then you have Minnesota where Eric Kendricks and others are coming out and saying that Zimmer was a dictator. That tells me that the ownership has a complete disconnect with the players.
Losing organization, Miami Dolphins. Rob Mattie's here. We'll talk Eagles, Bucks. He's down there covering both teams for the Associated Press. Thoughts on all the coaching hires and more. Don't go away. Rob Mattie's next on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Prop Swap is where America buys and sells sports bets. The football playoffs are finally here, and prop swappers are cashing in like Jesse from New York, who sold his $250 ticket 100-1 Patriot. Prop Swap is where America buys and sells sports bets. The football playoffs are finally here, and prop swappers are cashing in like Jesse from New York, who sold his $250 100-1 Patriots championship football ticket for $2,500 on Prop Swap. Jesse locked in his profit when he turned his $250 bet. Jesse locked in his profit when he turned his $250 bet into $2,500. The buyer got great odds. The seller made 10 times his bet. PropSwap has thousands of buyers and sellers all across the country, so you'll always find the best odds and collect the most money for your bets. So hurry and download the free PropSwap app today. Some breaking news. The Giants have fired Joe Judge. He is out in New York. The Giants have fired Joe Judge. Joe Judge fired just moments ago. Multiple sources reporting that. So Joe Judge is out in New York. Damn it. I hate to see people lose their jobs, especially inept ones. Rob Motti is here from the Associated Press, and he's going to talk a lot of football with us, playoffs, coaching, carousel, and more. What's going on, Rob?
What's up, Mike? How about that news, huh?
Right as you come on, Joe Judge out.
You know what? I thought that it was going to be strange for them to keep him in limbo like that as you're going to hire a GM. If you're going to bring in a new GM with Gettleman stepping down, you got to bring in a new head coach or he's going to be a lame duck anyway. So it makes sense. Bad news for the Eagles, though.
Yeah, I think the whole Judge thing, I mean, it just kept the circus cloud tent over top that organization where yesterday he didn't even know if he was going to be fired or not. It was going back and forth.
Yeah, it was strange. And it was really an odd situation for the Giants and for him to be in, for the players to be in, for them not to know how it's going to look moving forward, whether this guy's going to be there. But it makes sense for the Giants. And there's been I didn't realize this, that they haven't had a winning season, haven't even had a winning record at any point.
Rob, they've had 5 straight years of 10 losses or more.
It's horrible, man. That's a horrible organization right now.
Warms my heart.
For a once storied franchise, Mike, but that's New York's problem, right? That's not our problem anymore.
It isn't, but let's stay on the coaching thing while we started there. Miami, how about what happened there? What's the surprising part about that?
Well, the surprising part about that is you had a coach who won 19 games the last 2 years, and he loses a power struggle to the GM who's responsible for, or we think is responsible for, drafting Tua Tagovailoa over Justin Herbert. Now, Mike, I don't know if that was Brian Flores in the room banging the table for Tua over Justin Herbert. They know that. And Chris Greer keeping his job, and Brian Flores probably isn't going to be unemployed for much longer because he's going to get some interviews, and he's already getting some interviews now, and there's some attractive jobs that are out there. But I was surprised that they did that, and they let the GM, who is responsible for putting that roster together, and some egregious mistakes. We'll look at it from the standpoint of trading and giving the Eagles an extra first-round pick. Now, I know they're happy with Jalen Waddle, but you also gave up an extra first-round pick, and I don't think he's markedly that significantly more a better player than a Devontae Smith. So I think he's made some mistakes in the draft as well.
Doug Peterson is interviewing a lot of places, maybe almost all the other ones, Jacksonville, Chicago. Is Doug Peterson going to get one of these jobs, Rob?
I think he is, Mike, but it wouldn't shock me if he doesn't. Like, if I had to put the percentages, I'd go 60-40 that he does get a job, but I don't think it's stronger than 60. I would give Doug Peterson another opportunity if I was the Chicago Bears with a young quarterback like Justin Fields. I think that Doug Peterson is an attractive head coach. If I'm the Jacksonville Jaguars with Trevor Lawrence, with an organization that needs a winning culture, someone to instill that, somebody who is a player's coach, somebody who can bring some leadership to it, I would look at Doug Peterson. I think those are two organizations. If you're the Minnesota Vikings and you got Kirk Cousins and Dalvin Cook, at least Cousins for one more year at $35 million, and Dalvin Cook and Justin Jefferson, I think Doug Peterson can win there as long as they can rebuild and do something about that defense. But I'm not convinced that he's going to get an opportunity. Listen, there's going to be a strong push, right, for these teams to consider all candidates. And the NFL wants to see more minority candidates get opportunities. And last coaching cycle, it was only one black head coach hired, and that was David Culley. And I know Robert Saleh is also considered a minority, but these are things that the NFL is pushing strongly for. Doesn't mean owners have to go out and do it, but it's something that the NFL is pushing strongly for. And it wouldn't surprise me if Doug maybe ends up losing out. Now, there's a bunch of opportunities, and now the Giants' job becomes open. Hey, if you're the Giants, do you bring in a former rival? Imagine the Giants bringing in the coach who cost them a playoff spot at 6-10 last year, Doug Peterson, as much as that fan base hated him for tanking that last game of the year.
Wild there. That's a good scenario. What about John Gannon and the possibility he's going to get an interview in Denver? I don't know if anybody else, but John Gannon, head coach.
Yeah, he's going to get an interview in Denver. I think he's on some teams' lists. And today he didn't want to talk about it. Tried to get him to say anything about it. He didn't want to say anything about this opportunity. I think he's a guy who's still a little bit away from getting that head. I'd be surprised, Mike, if he gets a head coaching opportunity over some of the other candidates out there. There'd be a lot of people who would probably be upset about that too. When you look at, there's a strong list of candidates, and Jonathan Gannon hasn't really paid his dues. He's 39 years old. He's been a defensive coordinator one season. He had a terrible start to the year with the Eagles, and they came on and they did better defensively over the second half of the season, but the quality of the quarterback that they faced dropped off tremendously from the Prescotts and the Mahomes and the Bradys and guys like that to playing Jake Fromm and towards the end. And then you see what I know is a meaningless game for the Eagles, but Prescott hangs 51 on them against the backups, and that shouldn't be held against them. But I'd be surprised if he'll get some interviews, but I'd be surprised if he gets a job right now.
Yeah, that you mentioned the quarterback level of competition. In other words, that's taken a jump back up this week, right? They're going to go back to Brady. So the Garrett Gilberts, the Jake Fromms, those guys are in the rear view. Brady's back. The last time they faced Brady, that didn't go so well. So let's dive into this matchup a little bit. This Buccaneers team, now you're around them a lot too. Are they banged up enough that this is even the playing field?
I don't think it evens the playing field because you still got the GOAT. You still got Tom Brady, and I just saw him Sunday, even, without Antonio Brown, without Chris Godwin. He's got Brashard Perriman making sideline twisting, leaping, toes drag catches, right? So he didn't have Gronk in that last meeting. He did have Brown and Godwin, but he didn't have Gronk. So it's a little bit of a trade-off. Lose two, bring one of those guys in. So they're a banged-up football team, that's for sure. They're getting some guys back this week, and Leonard Fournette's coming back. And most importantly for them on defense, linebacker Levante David's coming back, and their defense hasn't been the same since he's been out for the past few weeks. And that's going to be a significant upgrade for them if he can go, if he's healthy, because you're bringing these guys off IR. They haven't played in 3 weeks. How much do they have as far as being able to be back to what they were early in the season from a physical standpoint? So listen here. I look at it like this. There's upsets in wild card weekend all over the place. You see road teams winning. The best team doesn't always win. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are the superior football team. They're better coached. They have the greatest quarterback of all time. They have better talent. They're the defending Super Bowl champions. That doesn't mean the Eagles are going to go in there and automatically get the doors blown off. They can go in there, and there's a formula for winning against Brady, and there's a formula for winning for every team in the NFL, wild card weekend or any game. You run the football effectively. You keep the best player on the field, on the sideline. You control the clock that way, and if you can get a turnover or two and win that battle, that increases your chances. Will that happen? I don't think so. Can that happen? Anything is a possibility, Mike. It's the NFL. We saw the clown show Jaguars beat the Indianapolis Colts on Sunday, so anything's possible.
Right. Well, what happened in that game, and now the backlash is beginning. I mean, you're seeing articles in Indianapolis. Can we get out of the Wentz deal? What can they do? What has happened with the Wentz, Reich, and that whole situation in Indianapolis?
That was a terrible game all around, everybody. It was a terrible game for the offensive line that was really good with some Pro Bowl players. They allowed 6 sacks. Carson Wentz needed to step up and win a football game for his team. He needed to be great. He needed to have a game like he did earlier in the season. I think it was a Monday night game against Baltimore where he threw for over 400 yards, and they still lost when they missed a field goal in overtime or late in the game. He needed that kind of game. Instead, he gave you like a 2020 Carson Wentz type of game, and that was unacceptable. And I think that leads to question marks in Indy, because when you needed your quarterback to step up in a big time game when you had to win against a terrible opponent who, for all intents and purposes, was playing not to lose their number one draft pick. And fortunately for them, they win and the Lions win, so they end up with the number one pick. I think there's going to be question marks for sure in Indianapolis, and deservedly so. How crazy is this, right? Carson Wentz throws 7 interceptions this year. He finishes third in the NFL in interception ratio. And most people are looking at his season and going, right? It's the number one quarterback in interception ratio was Aaron Rodgers. 2 through 6, the 5 best quarterbacks in terms of protecting the football, not throwing picks after that. Carson Wentz, Russell Wilson, I believe Jared Goff is in there, and 2 other, I forget right off the top of my head. None of them made the playoffs. None of them. Yeah. What does that tell you? It's okay to turn the football over.
Well, and I'm not a Wentz hater by any stretch of the imagination. I feel almost bad for the guy because when he was great, and he was great, it was after the injuries. I think those injuries just piled up on him, and what made him great, he can't do anymore. What made him great was being able to improvise and get out and escape and move and throw on the run. He can't do that anymore. And he's not good enough to stand in the pocket and just throw like Brady and Rodgers and those guys. He was great because he was a little different, and he can't be different anymore. So now he's just another guy.
We still see those plays occasionally.
Not enough, right? Not enough,
right? And that's the thing, not enough. And you see them and you go, oh, that's the guy that you remember for. And I'm starting to believe that those injuries, because what we saw in 17 is just he's not there. Now there was that stretch in 19 where he took the practice squad in 4 must-win games and won them all, and led to Josh Perkins and the Boston Scott and whoever else he was throwing to. I forget, Deontay Burnett and all these guys, and he carried them to the playoffs that year, and then he takes that hit from Jadeveon Clowney, and he hasn't been the same since. And even though he was better this year in terms of not throwing those picks, and he had those plays, they were isolated. Anytime you see a highlight play from Carson, it's one of those plays where you go, oh wow, this is what he used to do, but you're not seeing it week in and week out. And that's like you said, you almost feel bad for the guy, because what happened? How did he get to that point? And I still think maybe he can get better. He can use another year with Frank Reich and see what happens there. But I can understand if Indy wants to move in a different direction.
Crazy to think. This is a guy who was the number 2 pick in the draft, probably would have been the MVP of the league. And now they're trying to figure out another organization, trying to figure out a way to move on. We're going to talk more about Tampa and Philly on Thursday and these NFL playoffs with Rob Motti. I do want to ask you, you are a Baseball Hall of Fame voter, and everybody's putting their ballots out there. You tweeted today that you might be up for a change.
Yeah, Mike, I think it's disgraceful what I've been seeing with the Hall of Fame balloting. I appreciate the honor. I consider it a privilege to vote, but I think something needs to change. When you see a ballot out there today, so I forget, it was a Shaughnessy from the Boston Globe. I think that Jeff Kent was how do you look at that ballot? And I voted for Jeff Kent in the past, and I probably will vote for him again. And I couldn't this year because of the 10 max rule. And I just wondered if there's 10 other guys I wanted to put in. But how is that the only name that you look at this ballot that I consider loaded with 12, 13, 14 quality Hall of Fame worthy players, and that's the only name you pick? Like, there's too much bias. There's too many reasons, too many people who hold grudges against other guys and are voting for reasons other than what the players did on the baseball field. And I think it should have been done a while ago. They should strip us baseball writers of our Hall of Fame vote and do it a different way. And maybe it's a committee of Hall of Famers who are still alive, maybe a panel of journalists, but not 200-300, whatever the number is right now, who are eligible to vote. Maybe a rotating panel of some senior writers who've been around the game for 2, 3, 4 decades, the Jason Starks, Peter Gammons, guys like that. Eventually maybe I could be among those. I'm only 20 years in. I'm not 30, 40, 50 years in. But if they take my vote away and do the voting process, make it better, make it more fair, I'm all for it.
Yeah, by the way, Dan Shaughnessy for the second year in a row voted for Jeff Kent and Jeff Kent only. That's it.
I don't get that. How do you explain that? It's mind blowing to me.
Yeah. Now, for the people out there, Rob, are you a Bonds Clements voter?
Yeah, and I have been, and I voted for Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens. I vote for all the PED guys, and I've always explained it this way. I think the only fair way to vote is to vote what the numbers and the stats tell you, because I don't know who took what and at what point in their life did they take it. I hear people say, "Well, Bonds and Clemens were Hall of Famers before they started injecting." I don't know that. When did they start injecting anything? I'm a guy who was living proof that you could use over-the-counter supplements, hard work in the gym, and a great eating regimen and put on 40 pounds of muscle. I did that in my lifetime. I packed on, I was 225 pounds with body fat in the single digits. And so I think, and I use supplements that were illegal to Major League Baseball players. J.C. Romero got suspended 50 games from the Phillies the year after they won the Super Bowl for taking an over-the-counter supplement that I know I personally took. So, and then you also look at some of the guys in the 60s and 70s who've openly admitted to taking amphetamines and greenies, as they're called. That's what they were known. Is something that helps you with your alertness, and that would help you with your hand-eye coordination. And I think that helps you hit a baseball far better than having muscles and being jacked up. So I feel like that was a performance-enhancing supplement for guys who are in the Hall of Fame in the 60s and 70s. So to me, the only fair way to vote is to vote strictly based off of the numbers. And that's why I voted for Bonds. I voted for Clemens. I voted for Sosa. I voted for Palmeiro when he was on the ballot, Mark McGwire when he was on the ballot, Gary Sheffield, Manny Ramirez, and all of those guys.
Rob Motti from the Associated Press is back on Thursday. We'll do a lot more on the game and the matchups. He'll be covering both Philly and Tampa as they get ready for the Super Wild Card weekend. All right, Rob, we'll talk to you then.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it, bud.
Take care, bud. There's Rob Motti, everybody from the Associated Press here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. We'll get ready to wrap up the show, close it all out. Josh has game night coming up next. No Flyers tonight. That game is canceled because of a COVID situation with the Flyers side of things. Anthony James watching, Motti too. It's an all-star lineup today. We had a good lineup today. We had a lot of fun. Hey, if you follow me on Twitter at Mike Gill Show, you would have saw last night that I was planning on having a big show, big week. We got bigger names coming later on in the week as well. We hope you're with us here, getting you ready for Super Wild Card weekend on the Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. Getting ready to wrap up a Tuesday show. Sports Bash Live 97.3 ESPN. Rob Monty's appearance today was brought to you by Resorts Casino Hotel in Atlantic City. I'm Mike Gill. Rob will be back on Thursday. So we've got no Flyers tonight, so we got a free night. This is TV season. I'm going to start doing my list of the TV shows to watch outside of football season now at 97.3ESPN.com. So I'm going to start taking recommendations for that. Started a new show last night, Josh, because this Harlan Coben, he does a lot of things on Netflix.
Yeah, I know he is. Heard of him.
Yeah, so I've watched a lot of, The Five, The Stranger,
Mhm.
a couple other ones. He has a new one that just came out on
Okay.
New Year's Eve. Watched that already. There's only 8 episodes.
Okay.
So I watched that one already.
Plowed
So
through.
he has other ones that are on there that are older. And one of them is called, oh man, I can't remember what it's called. I'm on the 6th episode. So just started last night. The problem is it's like in Spanish, but they dub the English, so the lips don't match the words. But it's really riveting, man. I got to be honest.
All right.
But this is the time of the year because now Monday nights and Thursday nights are open.
Correct.
So now there's no Flyers tonight either.
No, you have even more time.
Yeah, well, Bachelor was on last night. That's like my, I got to watch that with the lady. She likes that, so we watch that. I got to give and take, right? She watches football and basketball with me. I got to pick a show to watch with her, so I'm on Bachelor duty.
Is it my time to come up, give you a new list of things, and maybe you'll pick 1 out of the 10?
Well, people, this is the time of the year where we'll start asking people to text in, give me a show. I got a lot, though. I'm pretty backed up right now with this. I'm watching The Crown. It's about
Is that on Netflix?
Yep, about the
Okay.
royal family. Apparently, it's very good. What do you got coming up tonight?
I got Jeff Ulbrich from the DraftKings NFL analyst.
All right. So you're going to do a little football, I'm
Yeah, a little
imagining.
football
Probably
tonight,
going to recap that game from last night.
Yeah, a little bit. Yep.
A little bit. Sixers looking for 8 in a row tomorrow night. We'll talk with Paul Hudrick tomorrow. Former NFL offensive tackle Joe Valerio is on the show tomorrow as well.
Cup of Joe.
Mike McGarry. Yeah, Cup of Joe. Hey, by the way, did you see that whole thing with Quez Watkins? Did we ever verify whether Quez Watkins was watching the show yesterday?
All I can verify is that account is apparently private.
Oh.
I actually can't find the actual account.
So Quez Watkins must have been watching the show yesterday and commented on our show stream. I'm back tomorrow. Have a great night, everybody.